Oh my gosh, yeah.
Here, if it's in your way.
You know, none of those chairs we tried out felt as comfortable as this one.
Really? You don't think so?
Really. Yes.
Huh.
Really.
Setting's better for Lauren or something. They're all way more comfortable.
Yeah.
Oh, no, I think these chairs are great. My feet hit the ground the right way. It's got the right length of the seat. It's got longer arms.
Have with philosophical.
Yeah.
For the record, thank you very much.
Those are just copies.
Oh, they're copies. Thank you.
Yep. We got to make sure we keep it.
Okay, we are on air. Is everybody ready? Scott, you good? Yep. Probably not last name to the order. All right. I hereby call the 2,262nd meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, well, you can up on that. Thank you.
Ready?
Yeah, okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, you may as well stay standing there.
Oh, okay.
So our first item tonight is African American History Month. It's a proclamation. It's going to be introduced by Greg Heemer from the Milwaukee Historical Society and Curtis and Dorothy Hadley, former owners of the Milwaukee Pastry Kitchen, and Kimberly Moreland with the Oregon Black Pioneers. So if you could all come forward, we can get a couple more chairs there. Or
Mr. Mayor, if you will allow me, we have this organized
all right,
ourselves.
I'll let you guys
so thank you.
produce it.
First of all, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your State of the City address. It was excellent and very well received. And Kimberly Moreland was not able to attend tonight. So my name is Greg Heemer, Vice President of the Milwaukee Historical Society. First of all, thank you, Scott Stauffer, Councilor Beatty, Mayor Gamba, and our keynote speaker, Councilor Abma, for being a part of our newest exhibit, Milwaukie, A History of the West Dogwood City, which can be viewed on Saturdays, 1 to 5 p.m. in Milwaukie Museum, located at 3737 Southeast Adams Street. Councilor Abma made excellent points about how change is a normal fabric of our lives and city. But change can happen while embracing our past. Milwaukee Historical Society would also like to thank the city, especially the Recorder's Office, for their continuing support of our mission in preserving Milwaukee's history for future generations. We appreciate allowing us to present proclamations and being included in various city events. We also want to stress the importance of Milwaukie Museum being a center for art, community culture, and humanity. Our collection has photographs, paintings, and spreads the enthusiasm of our community's heritage, old and new. As we move forward into the future, we know our partnership will flourish and grow with our common goal of increasing and expanding art and common culture. Unfortunately, Kim was not able to be here, but if you want to know more about the Oregon Black Pioneers, they will be visiting the Milwaukie Museum, Tuesday, February 13th, starting at 3:30 p.m. for Milwaukie Historical Society's monthly meeting.
By they, you mean her.
Her.
It's going to be, okay, just not
Sorry,
that
I'm modifying my speech as I go, Lisa.
Okay.
There are very few living legends of Milwaukie. Present company, of course, excluded. But Dorothy and Hurtis Hadley, former owners of Milwaukie Pastry Kitchen on Main Street, are definitely two of them. Now, Dorothy's not just here to sell her cookbook, Honey's favorite desserts and brunches too, on sale for $24. And Hurtis is not here to benefit me on getting me a better tea time at Eastmoreland Golf Course.
I got you a sweet potato pie.
Yeah!
Oh, I want that.
Nor are they here because of their ethnicity. They are here because of their intelligence, their kindness, their humor, and above all else, because they are role models to anyone and everyone. They have experienced hardship and adversity, resulting in many of us just to give up and accept our fate. But the Hadleys used their skill, intelligence, and personalities to overcome the naysayers and become successful when the odds were against them. In my mind, three of their greatest attributes are believing humanity is generally good, believing in themselves to pursue their dreams, and humility about their success. Without further ado, it is Milwaukie Historical Society's honor and privilege to introduce Dorothy and Hurtis Hadley.
Okay. Well, you got a hard act to follow. First of all, I'd like to thank the
Can
Oregon
you pull that
Historical
mic up? Just let's make sure it's picking you up. Yeah, good. Thank you.
My voice flows.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Milwaukie Historical Society, the City Council, and the Mayor of Milwaukie for including us in this Black History production.
If there is no struggle, there is no success. Okay. If there is no struggle, there is no success. Frederick Douglass, 1857. When my husband told me he wanted us to buy a bakery, I asked, where is it at? And he said, Milwaukie, Oregon. I said, oh, no. There's cowboys out there. I'm a country girl. The bakery had been closed due to the owner's illness. We met with him, and he told us if we bought the bakery, he would do the PR work for us and assured Hurtis he would do well because he had up-to-date baking skills. The PR worked well, and on opening day, we received bouquets of flowers from the community, and we had people lined up around the block to come into the bakery. And guess what? My first customer arrived in cowboy boots. A former customer who lived in New York City, bought a banana whipped cream cake. She said it was the best cake she had tasted, and she told us the former owner delivered a banana whipped cream cake every year to her mother on her birthday, who lived in a care facility in in Oregon City. She asked if Hurtis would continue the service. Hurtis would dress up in top hat and tails, and since he already sang, we never say sing, we say sang, in a band called the Fabulous Majestics, he would include the happy birthday song. People started hearing about it, and they started asking if he would deliver a cake to family and friends. So this event turned out to be cake on wheels. We bought Milwaukie Pastry Kitchen in 1977. It was a full-line bakery, and Hurtis did all the baking and the cake decorating. I always tell people Hurtis was in charge of the dough in the back, and I was in charge of the dough in the front. And I always had to have more dough at the end of the day than Hurtis. During the summer, our oldest son, Mixon, came in early with his dad to fry donuts. Our daughter, Lori, and youngest son, Darren, came in later with me to help run the front. We had several incidents happen on in the bakery. Hurtis was constantly asked about his experience to operate a bakery. A white man came in and put his shoes on the display case and said to me, "Are those nigger-told pastries?" One day, a bank manager of a bank in downtown Milwaukee came in the bakery and said, "Is your husband here?" And I said, "No, he's not." And he said, "Where is he?" I said, "Why do you want to know?" And he said, "A black man just robbed the bank, and he looked just like your husband." I couldn't believe he had the nerve to accuse my husband of robbing the bank. When Hurtis came back from picking up supplies, not robbing a bank, he went straight to the bank and asked to speak to the bank manager. At first, he refused to come out. When he finally came out, he didn't give Hurtis a reason as to why he had accused him, a business owner in Milwaukee. The next day, he sent me a bouquet of flowers, which I promptly threw in the trash. Hurtis began his baking career as a baker's helper at the Bohemian Bakery, which supplied baked goods to the Keno stores. A lot of you probably went to the Kenos and bought their banana whipped cream cake, because that's what they were famous for, and that was the same one that Hurtis used to make at the bakery. Hurtis received his baking degree of baking technology in 2 years through a 3-year apprenticeship program at Portland Community College. He was the first person in Oregon to graduate from the program and become a professional baker.
The first black person.
Did I say accused? Okay.
Yeah, you said accused.
I'm still on that. Okay, he was the first black person to complete the program. Do I need my glasses?
No, you're good.
Okay. We closed Milwaukie Pastry Kitchen in 1985 due to the 80s recession. The rent increased by the landlord during the recession and the building of Clackamas Town Center. I became a demo girl for local groceries and food shows. When you're a demo girl, you never become a woman. You're always a young girl. When our children were bused at an all-white school, I joined the PTA and wrote and produced the Black History play for Black History Month that the bus students performed. I'd asked the principal if he and the music teacher would help with the play. They never did. Our neighbor, Mrs. Willa Dorsey, a famous black opera singer, directed the choir for us. I worked several years in the public school as a mentor tutor for AmeriCorps. As an experienced Corps member, I was able to write several more Black History plays. And the neat thing about my schools that I was at, they were all white, and all my children loved to be in the Black History play, and they all played slaves, and they played in black inventors and black educators, and they all called me Grandma Honey. I'm a crafter and a self-published author. Hurtis was a former member on the Apprenticeship Board of Oregon. He is a mentor for SCORE, a starter at Eastmoreland Golf Course. He tells me he's a fair golfer. He doesn't work or play in the rain. He's a lifetime member of the Royal Rosarian and a docent at the Oregon Historical Society. He will be giving group tours of the Racing to Change exhibit through June 2018. If you haven't been down to see it, I encourage you to go. It's a very nice exhibit featuring blacks in Oregon from 1940 through the present. And yours truly is in that exhibit also.
Nice.
Thank you. Some reasons why we should celebrate Black History Month. Hopefully, in the near future will be American history. Dr. Carter G. Woodson was an African-American writer and historian known as the father of Black history. Dedicated his career to the field of African-American history and lobbied extensively to establish Black History Month as a nationwide institution. Dr. Woodson, a former slave, established Black History Month in February 1926 to give recognition to the Black Americans who had made contributions in helping to build America, but were omitted from the history books. In 1976, President Gerald Ford made Black History Month official. Along with my wife, Dorothy, we became Milwaukie, Oregon's first Black-owned business and Oregon's first Black fully-owned bakery. Dr. Martin Luther King said, by the time we leave for work, Americans had depended on inventions from the mind of Black Americans. Few crops would have been grown because America was built on a slave-supported system. Black history includes more than slavery. Our food would spoil if it was not for John Standard's patented improvement through the refrigeration in June 1891. To direct traffic on the streets, Garrett A. Morgan invented the traffic light in 1923. On July 6, 1971, Henry T. Sampson invented the cell phone. Dr. Charles Drew set up and operated the first blood bank used by the Red Cross around 1945. John P. Moon made a floppy disk, so every time we use the save command on our computer, we're probably using his invention. When we celebrate Black History Month, we are passing on and recognizing, celebrating our contribution to America, and to remember our struggles and accomplishments that have been made to fight racism. Also, to recognize the work and equality that still needs to be done and passed on to the younger generation. Thank you.
Well, you.
Well, I have a proclamation to read here, and I don't know if anybody else would like to say something before we do that, but we wish you were still here.
We do.
Every time there's a poll done in the city of Milwaukie about what do we need in the city, a good bakery comes like first or second every single time. They miss you.
Thank you. He is a good baker, but he'll tell you real quick. He tells me, you know, I'm retired, Dorothy. You'll have to.
Thank you. That was really an amazing sort of trip through history, and it is horrible how left out Black people are in our history, and I'm super happy that we here in Milwaukie at least get to rectify that just the tiniest little bit.
Thank you. Yeah, we're real proud that Milwaukie remembers us and asked us to speak. We couldn't believe it when they said they want us to speak. I said, what do we talk about?
I said, let's talk about the 51 years we've been together.
Well, what happened to the other 6?
Thanks for reminding me.
Well, and I will say I got to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Hadley at the museum last Friday, and they have a lot of great stories, and they are survivors of the Vanport floods. They're families that migrated here from Arkansas for the jobs during the war.
Yeah.
I think it would be great if the museum did a little oral history with the Hadleys and got their story down.
So we're just so booked up, we're going to have to write them in.
Anyway, we're really glad that you're here.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Should I read the proclamation?
Well, I'll just say that I had the opportunity also to speak with both of them at the Historical Society event, and just wonderful people with wonderful, incredible stories to tell. And as Lisa mentioned, I hope that you document some of those stories. I had said to you, you had said that you were published and that you had written plays, and I said, please record your history because it's important.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We all have some real incredible role models to look up to, and thank you very much for sharing your story with us.
I've been my role model for over 35. Very proud of them.
I think you've blessed us with your presence tonight. Thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad.
You know, being a business person in Milwaukee and walking the streets of Milwaukee, we felt very welcome. All the businesses that was existing during that time, you know, Perry's, the meat market, Pelishani's, Lynn's Pharmacy, and there was a tragedy with Mr. Lynn. He found suicide in his shop at the pharmacy. But overall, we established a good rapport and felt very welcome for the time we was here.
Thank you.
All right. City of Milwaukee Proclamation. Whereas in February, we recognize and acknowledge the African-American struggle for racial justice that stirred the very conscience of our nation and helped guide the shape of her character. And whereas African Americans for generations have courageously led the pursuit of justice and equality, from Frederick Douglass to Harriet Tubman to Martin Luther King Jr. and beyond. As our nation struggles to overcome past and present failings that result in persistent inequality, such leaders are crucial to help guide us closer to the founding principles that all people are created equal. And whereas African Americans have made significant contributions to our nation's economic, educational, political, artistic, literary, scientific, and technological advancements, despite historical and current injustices. Whereas in Milwaukee, we celebrate the contributions of African Americans who have been active in our community, including the entrepreneurial boxing promoter George Moore and Milwaukee Pastry Kitchen proprietors Hurtis and Dorothy Hadley. And whereas incidents in recent years have given rise to greater awareness of the continued discrimination and even violence that African Americans face in their daily lives, and the importance of a greater national dialogue to promote understanding and break down barriers. And whereas individuals, we must learn more about the history of African Americans generally, and in Oregon in particular, and work to build a Milwaukee where every person has equal access to education, to educational and employment opportunities and housing. Now, therefore, I, Mark Gamba, Mayor of the City of Milwaukee, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, and with the full support and sponsorship of the Milwaukee Historical Society, do hereby proclaim February 2018 to be African American History Month in Milwaukee, and do recommend its observance with the appropriate programs and activities.
Pictures with the Hadleys with the council, please.
No glasses.
I think maybe
Okay, I'll copy this here.
all right. Bruce, it's your job to rope in your wife to make sure that she smiles. I know that's
She's got a great smile. You don't have to worry about that.
Greg, don't start now, it won't be now.
I'll let the cell phones go. So this camera, and then we'll do cell phone. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Thank you.
Greg? No, we're all good.
Good?
Yes.
I should have brought my big camera.
So much.
I did it.
Yeah, did you know Bill McDonald, the attorney?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
That's my guy.
Is that right? Oh,
He's
okay.
living in President. I was so happy that I met you guys. I would love to.
I want to tell you guys both.
Oh, okay. You better autograph it before he brings it.
Double the price.
Sophie and Curtis are with the camera right on top of them. Scott, is that the Milwaukie Community Channel?
Channel 30.
No, how do you find it on YouTube?
Just Google City of Milwaukee on YouTube. We'll send a link. We'll send a link tomorrow.
Facebook or
YouTube.
Thank you. I love you so much. I'll price it on here. I'll look for it.
Okay.
I'll look for it.
I'll send a link.
You gonna go and get the book?
Yeah.
We need help, Dorothy.
No, I just get my cups in. I'm gonna go and do some more work. I'm not off yet. I'm just trying to they gotta go
Go on, get your book.
Or you can bring it.
I'll just coordinate.
Okay.
It's good to see all these smiling faces. I really wish I had the baby here.
These people can eat.
All right. Next up, we have the Solarize Milwaukie campaign, a final report, and this will be introduced by Peter Passarelli and Stefan Lashbrook.
Thank you, Mayor Gamba. Truly a hard act to follow. What I wanted to do was really provide a brief update on the Solarize Milwaukie program that we started last summer, and also recognize some of the key staff members that were involved in the program. During your State of the City address tonight, you sort of beat me to the punch on some of the highlights there, but we'll go over it a little bit more. Alma Frankenstein was really the primary program manager, staff manager for this project, and she sends her regrets tonight, was unable to be here. But Stefan Lashbrook also was highly involved with the program over the fall and into the until he left us earlier this past month in January. As you know, the program started this past summer, and we worked with Sunlight Solar Energy as our partner on the program. And the program provided education to homeowners about solar for residential properties, connected them with the installer, the Sunlight Solar Energy, and also provided a reduced cost for installation for those residential property owners. The program resulted in 14 installations in the community, and was, I think, a successful first step towards bringing solar into our community and heading in the right direction. I think Stefan has a few remarks he'd like to make about how we can improve on the program in the future. So I'll turn it over to Stefan.
All right, thank you. I want to add a few comments about Alma Frankenstein first, and just point out she is a grad student and worked as an intern for the city. I tried to encourage her to stick around for another internship, and she felt like she'd better get back to doing some schoolwork because she spent so much time on this, and so she deserves really most of the credit for the accomplishments. But and she also forwarded some suggestions going forward, and I hope you'll take those to heart. There are just a few things that I'd point out. Obviously, the end of the residential energy tax credit program by the state was a big factor, and it's just hard to know what the future might hold, whether the state will renew that. But if so, I have to think there are a number more households out there that would take advantage of this. a couple of the things that I think we could have done better, and I arrived right at the start of the open house program, and I basically was just helping out any way I could around the edges. But had we been able to start earlier, if we'd been able to start in the spring instead of the summer, even earlier in the spring, then people who have problems like, I'm going to need a new roof before I can do this, they might have had time to get that done. Places that needed structural upgrades, and I have one of those houses myself, where just the way the roof is constructed, the nature of the rafters and the spacing of the rafters requires reinforcement to be able to use it. And so that's another thing that people could have, if they'd had a little more time, could have taken care of. And even the cases where trees are shading houses, in some cases, just trimming some of those trees could have made some of those houses qualify. A couple more points. We went into it thinking we had 2 contractors we'd be working with. One of them either couldn't or wouldn't meet the city's insurance requirements. Alma talked about that in her notes. Whether those requirements should be changed or not, that's really up to you and as city manager, city attorney to talk about. But having 2 contractors really would have helped, because there were times when people just wanted to talk to another contractor, and that wasn't a bad reflection on Sunlight Solar. I don't think. It's just, it makes sense. You'd like to know that there are 2 different firms competing for your business. When we got to open houses, and Mayor Gamba, Council President Beatty, both thank you for attending. We heard some questions about taxes where there was nobody in the room qualified to answer those questions. And several of us said things like, well, I think it's like this, but don't take my word for it. That's a little scary. And in fact, it would be good, even if it's just at one open house, to have somebody, a CPA, somebody who's has that expertise to be able to answer those questions, because we really didn't do a very good job with that. I'm glad to hear there's still conversation about community solar. I was glad you mentioned it, Your Honor, in your comments earlier. I really think that holds a great future for a lot. When you think about the fact that we talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about this program, and to end up with only 14 at the end, you have to think some of them got bumped out of the program but would still like to have some way to participate, and community solar could be that answer. And finally, the idea of outreach to commercial and industrial rooftops. I think there's a lot of potential there for the future, and I hope that comes to pass. And I hope to be able to help when the time comes.
Thank you. We hope you will too.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both very much. It was a good first, good first shot at it. The timing was unfortunate as far as the RETSI goes, and now the ridiculousness at the federal level with the imports. But I think you're right. I think, this will all smooth out. The state will sort their stuff out, and eventually we'll get back to where it's a practical thing to do. And I think there's a few more laws to be worked out so that we can do the rooftop solar in the warehouse district, and that energy can be shared district-wide maybe. So
it's happening all around the world, and it's amazing that it's not happening here.
Yeah, and a lot of it's due to the rules and the laws that we have.
And I think it was an important program that we implemented. We learned some lessons from it, and when we go forward with our next program, our next solar program, we can take those lessons and put together a better program.
Yeah.
So I had a question on one of the lessons, which was at the end of the memo. It says something about encouraging the use of the Google, whatever it's called, rooftop.
Solar.
Yeah.
with my house, I was told, great, it looks good from that. And then when the actual sunlight guy came out, he even told me from Google Earth photos before he came, he said, I don't think you're going to qualify. And sure enough, when he came, he didn't. Was that an unusual experience? Is the Google tool more accurate? Am I just an outlier?
Well, what we heard from experts who were asked that question, and I'm not one, was that don't depend on it. Use it for just kind of an initial screening, a source of information, but it's not foolproof. Yeah. And so I think it's, in other words, use it, but use it with a grain of salt and get a professional out there to really look at what you've got.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Anything else?
I just would say I appreciate both what you said, Stefan, and what Alma put down on what we can do better. It was a great program, and the timing was unfortunate and such with the tax credits and all that, but I appreciate that you've looked at it and thought about it afterwards, and and some of these things we can easily do. So thank you for that, and thank you for your help.
All right. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.
I know we have at least one guy in the audience who works for another solar installer who was interested in seeing us move forward again.
Yeah. We will.
All right.
There will be more solar in Milwaukie.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. On tonight's consent agenda, we have the minutes of January 9th, 2018 study session. We have a resolution appointing Joseph Edge to the Planning Commission. We have adoption of the 2018 Council Committee assignments. We have a resolution authorizing the acquisition of real property for the construction of the Meek Street storm system. We have authorization of a letter of consent to participate in bond bank refunding of a loan number K05005 related to special public works loan for improvements at North Main Village, originally issued in 2005. We have approval of an Oregon Liquor Control Commission application for Roswell Market at 8929 Southeast 42nd Avenue. And we have a resolution authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with Clackamas County for the Monroe Street Greenway Concept Plan. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
No.
I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear citizen statements regarding city business. Those wishing to speak must fill out a green speaker card available on the table in the hall and identify agenda item number 4, audience participation. As council has other business items on the agenda this evening, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each. Because the information provided during public comment may be new to some councilors, the city manager will respond at the next council meeting to those comments that require follow-up. Before we begin, are there any follow-up reports from January 16, 2018 audience participation? Ms. Ober?
There are not.
All right.
You have one.
So I have one for this. So if anybody else, this is Milo Denham. So when you come up, please state your name and address for the record. Are you speaking as an individual or as the chair of the NDA?
That's why I said citizen, didn't I? Hope I did. Citizen.
Citizen. All right. That's 3 minutes. All right, thanks.
Milo Denham, 12106 Southeast 19th Avenue. I was concerned to read in the November 28th Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee minutes that there was a concern expressed by a city councilor that Highland Station may be overrepresented on the committee. I recently examined the membership requirements within the Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee bylaws and became aware of a bias in membership that makes the historic Milwaukie neighborhood overrepresented. By including a downtown business or property owner in the Kellogg Good Neighbor Committee membership, the bylaws have created a bias with 3 members from historic Milwaukie and only 2 from Island Station. This occurs because a downtown business or property is located entirely in the historic Milwaukie neighborhood, and a downtown business or property owner is automatically a member of the historic Milwaukie NDA. I find the bias especially concerning since the water resource recovery facility is located entirely within the Island Station neighborhood. To correct this bias towards the historic Milwaukie NDA and to balance the membership between the historic Milwaukie and Island Station neighborhoods, I urge the committee to accept the application of Melissa Crawford, who was invited to apply to be a citizen-at-large committee member on the Good Neighbor Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So next up, we have the North Industrial Area Comprehensive Plan Zoning Code Amendments and Ordinance.
No
No, did I skip
follow-up.
something?
Any follow-up reports from?
We already did that.
Okay, before? Okay.
The public hearing on the North Milwaukie Industrial Area Plan and Code Amendments file numbers CPA-2017-002 and ZA-2017-003 is called to order. Does any member of the council wish to announce any ex parte contacts or actual or potential conflicts of interest?
No.
What will qualify as ex parte contacts in this instance?
In a legislative, yeah. Is there anything?
I didn't think there was any such thing as ex parte contact in legislative issues.
I think that perhaps if any of you had indicated a willingness to someone to go one way or other on this, that's something that would need to be disclosed, because that would speak to bias potentially. Though, frankly, the bias wouldn't apply to a legislative either. So, I don't know.
Is this something we should pull off of the
script?
I'd pull it off the script.
For these kind of, okay, thank you. Does any member of the audience wish to make any challenge to any council member's impartiality or ability to participate in this decision? Seeing none, I will now entertain any objection to the council's jurisdiction to consider this matter. Seeing none. North Milwaukie Industrial Area Comprehensive Plan Zoning Code Amendments and Ordinance. We will now hear the staff presentation. So this is Amy Koski and Vera Colias, please. Colias, I always do that.
I will answer to both.
Throw something at me. Do I need to read the conduct of the hearing stuff before they start?
How you wait till you got to the point where...
Okay. All right. Cool.
It's fresh on the
I might not see it. There we go. Like, where is it? Is it working? Good evening. Are we ready?
We're ready.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Amy Koski, Economic Development Coordinator, and here with me is Vera Colias, Associate Planner, and we also have Alex Dupy from MIG, who's been the consultant on this project throughout the framework planning process. Tonight, we want to just highlight a few things in our presentation, give you a brief background on the NMIA district and the process and public input that we've had throughout the planning process, as well as go over some of the economics, the vision, and some case studies. We will then talk about the NMIA plan changes and comprehensive plan amendments, the code amendments, and then get to key questions for council to address. This is a general overview of the schedule that we anticipate going throughout the discussion of the NMIA plan and proposed code amendments. We've scheduled 3 meetings where we expect to get through the following details: the comprehensive plan and NMIA plan. with a proposed mixed-use overlay, the proposed zoning code amendments with proposed design and development standards, and then a final amendment package. If not completed by February 20th, then we could go on for that third hearing, or longer. This is how we're just anticipating it may flow. The project goal of this is to implement the NMIA framework plan and implementation strategy. On July 18th, after multiple advisory group meetings and public open houses and 3 planning commission meetings, City Council adopted a resolution directing staff to prepare plan and code amendments to implement the NMIA framework plan and implementation strategy. The plan focuses on increasing employment density in the area, providing amenities to serve employees, and accommodating office and industrial flex space. Just a quick map of where we are. The NMIA is directly north of downtown Milwaukie at the edge of southeast Portland. It's approximately 200 acres, and this industrial area is an in-demand area. This is an area where businesses can find flex space that they can't afford in Portland, but want to still be close in. There is some limited clustering. Anderson Dye and Manufacturing is one example that we've talked about throughout the process. They make nursery pots, and they have a composter in their space where they share the same extruders. They send their materials out, and the composter also shares, I mentioned that, shares their extruder in the space that they rent adjacent. This is still a shipping-focused area with trucks going in and out, but the size of the trucks are changing, and there are still large trucks, but it's more in demand with Amazon's smaller vans as opposed to the big transportation systems needs of the past. Flex space is big. Several warehouses have been converted to 1,000 up to 15,000 square foot spaces, so that where they were once single warehouses, they can now be broken up into smaller spaces with chain link fence and accommodate 1,000 square feet or add another 1,000 square feet as they grow and need more space. They share equipment with like forklifts and conference rooms. And this has really taken hold in the area where we have limited vacant land. For some of the area, it looks like it is vacant, but that land is often being used for storage. And there isn't a lot of space to build. There is transit access with the adjacent Orange Line at Tacoma Station, but it's difficult to get to depending on who you talk to. So these were some of the things that we were looking at when we first started the planning process in late 2016 into 2017. The district is comprised of 54 buildings, none built since the 1990s. Half of the parcels are less than half an acre, and only a handful are over 4 acres. We do have that limited vacant land, and the small parcels will likely require aggregation of parcels to create 5,000 square foot parcels or more. Generally speaking, roughly half of the properties in the NMIA are owner occupied. Our economic analysis was done in 2016 to 2017, and this is an area that is doing really well. It's been a little more cyclical because it's a smaller area, but total employment in the NMIA increased by 14% during this period of 2002 to 2014. This increase is higher than both Clackamas County and the state. Since the fourth quarter of 2006, when vacancy rates peaked at 19.8%, vacancies steadily declined to 5% in the second quarter of 2016. This was just slightly higher than when it reached its lowest point at 3.9% in the second quarter of 2012. Industrial rents in the NMIA make up the vast majority of the overall properties in the area. and currently average around 40 cents per square foot on a monthly basis, or a little less than $5 per square foot annually. This is for industrial rents. Recent asking rates of available space in the NMIA appear to be higher than average, starting at around 55 cents per square foot monthly, up to, which would be about $6.60 square foot annually. This is in line with other industrial areas in the region. Employment by industry, healthcare and social assistance, construction, wholesale trade, those are the largest percentages of employers in the district, and we're seeing growth. We're also seeing growth with professional, scientific, and technical services. We are starting to see some change from the traditional transportation and warehousing, which is where this district started, or what it started as. So Alex from MIG, he facilitated the public process all last year, and he's going to give an overview of some of the public outreach.
Great. Is there a slide before this one, or is there?
This is the first one. Did I skip one?
Fine. I can speak to it.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
There it is.
Well, thank you. Once again, my name is Alex Dupuy. I was the project manager for the North Milwaukie Industrial Area Framework Plan that was adopted in July. It was a quick process. We went from initiation to completion in about 11 months, and within that time frame, went essentially from ground zero, not really knowing the area in a lot of ways, to having really extensive business outreach and interaction, but also a larger community-wide conversation about, what is employment in Milwaukie, and not just what it is now, but what's the next generation of employment as we start to think about different types of formats and uses within both existing facilities, but also future buildings that will likely eventually be constructed within the area. We had several different focuses on our public involvement, both at a project advisory group level, which was chaired by Councilor Parks, that really had both local businesses. We do have a few residents within the area. There are residents represented there, as well as neighborhood groups and others, but also a technical advisory group that included members of the city, Public Works, ODOT, Department of Land Conservation and Development, to really make sure that as we step through this process, we were in line with what we were hearing both from the public process, but also that the technical information was sound and well vetted. Many of these meetings actually became combined meetings. So when we had a project advisory committee meeting, rather than doing them separate, we combined them because many people were interested in the types of information that were being disseminated each of the meetings. So we decided to combine them and have one conversation, which I think worked well because we were able to talk both technical and community focused at the same time. I'll step through each of these briefly, but just to give you a summary of the public advisory group process, we had 6 meetings plus a public kickoff that included a tour. For each of those meetings, we stepped through initial vision. That's where the process started, getting down into the fine-grained details of what each of the parcels would start to look like. What does the zoning look like? What are the varied uses? And a big question throughout that process was, what is this site in 10, 20, even 50 years? How do you take advantage of the existing light rail station? If you're looking at transit-oriented development, which is a mix of uses, whether it's residential or office with retail, where does that go? And for particularly industrial and maker space, which are smaller uses, where are the most appropriate locations for these different types of things? And then also a broader question, from knowing that this is a large employment area for the city of Milwaukie and actually regionally, what is its place within the employment kind of fabric of the area? And what are those supporting uses that should be as a part of the plan? Throughout the process, we continued to refine that, and at our last meeting in June, I believe it was, we asked for support to move the plan forward, which is very similar to what you see today. We asked, should this be primarily an employment area? We know that residential and mixed uses are allowed up near the light rail station. Should we allow allow residential within the proposed North Milwaukie Industrial Area zone, which is the new zone within the district. And we had a good conversation about that. The majority of people suggested that it should stay on employment to reduce the possibility of conflicts between various uses. But there was definitely a minority of folks who felt that there should be some residential within that area. We didn't get to agreement on where that residential would be, but we did get to general consensus that the plan should move forward into the process that we're in tonight. So from a process standpoint, the advisory groups recommended that we move forward in June with this area focused primarily as industrial or employment, but also a minority of people on those groups did suggest that we should still consider residential as a part of that within the North Milwaukie industrial area. Maybe next slide on that. So that was the 0 to 100 in terms of the advisory group. In between those meetings, we also had other types of outreach. We interviewed several businesses, both long and newer businesses, long-term and newer businesses with the industrial area to see, what's their plans? What do they need out of the sites? Where is it going? We also interviewed people who are trying to get into North Milwaukie and are, to be honest, having a hard time finding space. Overwhelmingly, what we found is that people, particularly newer employers, are looking for services for their employees. They're going to Sellwood, they're going to downtown Milwaukee. They'd love to have small retail or restaurants or other things within there that are within walking distance, but still limited in the types of uses. They want to preserve this as an employment area. We've heard overwhelmingly that it's hard to get to and it's dangerous. Many of the streets are dangerous either for pedestrians, but even if you're a car, trying to get on and off McLaughlin can be challenging. There are also visibility and branding issues. We talked with several brokers and developers towards the end of the process about, well, what do you know about North Milwaukie? And they said, we don't even know where it is. We don't even know what it does. But when we started to explain its, what it is and its fabric, they got very interested. And so there's a branding issue that we found through these stakeholder meetings too of the sites are there, it's well taken care of, it's fully occupied, but it's only known by a small number of people who are actually using the area. Others, input from stakeholders, Milwaukee's a great place to do business. People are moving from Portland because they like Milwaukie, they like the ease of use, the permitting process, which is great because those are the people that you're trying to attract with well-paying jobs, but also very locally focused as well. We had 3 public meetings throughout the plan. We started with the initial visioning meeting, and this was the first meeting that we had at OLCC. It was a tough place to get into, but once we were there, it was also, I think, the second game of the World Series, and Cleveland and Chicago, it's a tough thing to compete against. But we had about 30 people at this one, and we had over 90 people at the 3 public events. This was a great one where we got information about, what do you want to see, what don't you like, what are some of the improvements. Definitely connections to Johnson Creek, really starting to brand that and use that as a recreational amenity, but still preserving this area as employment has been an overwhelming kind of goal of the public involvement from what people have told us from these various events. Next. And then finally, early on with that first public meeting, we did an online survey that went to all Milwaukie residents. So it was available online. You could even take it off, from another city if you wanted to. It was posted live. But I think the biggest questions that came out of that, of the 100 or so participants that responded to it, it is tough to get into, whether you're a pedestrian, a cyclist, a vehicle. McLaughlin Boulevard is a challenge. It's a barrier. It's a nice place to go through, but it's a really hard place to get in and out of. People perceive this as transportation and shipping, and historically that is what North Milwaukie has been, whether it be rail or heavy trucks. That's how people perceive it. The difference is when we ask what a vision might be, still having that shipping component with it, but a much more fine-grained scale. Smaller uses, incubator spaces, which is kind of what we're already seeing in terms of how some of the businesses or the buildings are being broken up. People like this area because it's inexpensive, and there's large large warehouses that are being, sectioned off in that 1, 5, 10,000 square foot spaces that are very flexible and also very reasonably priced. So even Milwaukie residents are seeing, what we were seeing from the market and what the market is doing in North Milwaukie now. Some of the other pieces, parking, it's seen as a big parking lot in some ways, and likely that's what they're seeing from McLaughlin Boulevard. But parking is not something that they felt was necessarily, we shouldn't be storing cars in North Milwaukie. It should be an active employment area. So, what we took from that, from the implementation standpoint, is develop a parking management plan, but don't let that detract from the future businesses in the area. Don't make that the defining feature for this site. There was a focus on employment. We did not have a lot of interest in residential within the area. We did not ask in the survey specific locations about residential, but people did overwhelmingly say that this should remain as an employment area within the city.
So can I ask, nothing up there really talks about offices. I guess years ago when we were doing the first Tacoma Station Area Plan, and even before that, somebody said to me, oh, when that station comes, North Milwaukee is poised to be the next cruiseway, Why aren't offices more attractive? Why aren't, none of the buildings really are built for them now. That would be new development, I guess, but what?
I think there's a couple things working against office right now. One is that, as Amy said, it's mostly completely developed. So any new development, with the exception of a couple parcels, would require removing the existing building. And so if you look at the ownership, which is often long-term ownership in North Milwaukie, a lot of those buildings are paid off, and so people are making money off of that now. So why would you spend 2 years of construction losing that 2 years of income to build an office building? The other piece, and Cruiseway is a good example, actually, is services. Cruiseway, they're adding a grocery store. It's near executive residential. It has different features than what North Milwaukie has. Cruiseway also doesn't have heavy rail on two sides of it. One, a very active heavy rail alignment that, to be honest, makes it a bit more challenging.
You mean because of noise?
Noise and aesthetic, and and that's one.
But it has I-5. I mean, that's not very aesthetic either.
It is I-5, but you can drive your car on I-5.
Yeah.
And so that was one thing that we were challenged with, is like, okay, what's the right scale? And knowing that, to be honest, nothing really pencils from a new development in the area right now. But what does it look like in 5 years or 8 years as the market starts to catch up? And so that's maybe where you'd start to see some different things. But to be honest, light rail's in a challenging spot. It's very narrow where those spaces are right now, and access is particularly challenging by the spring water corridor there.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Alex. I think he'll stick around for questions at the end, too. In keeping with the goals of the NMIA plan, the vision is for as an employment district. Only 18% of the city is zoned for industrial employment use. Approximately 77% of the city is zoned residential. In comparison to other jurisdictions within the region, only 7 of 23 cities have more than 77% land residential, while 12 cities have more than 18% land zoned industrial. The NMIA is one of 3 employment districts in total that provides more than 12,000 jobs, and it's critical to the jobs housing balance in Milwaukie. Some cities, such as Portland, have adopted industrial sanctuary policies to protect industrial land and prevent residential uses. We're not proposing that level of policy through this plan, but we are instead increasing flexibility in the uses with the addition of office and some commercial. But we also want to carefully restrict uses to the limited employment land that we do have available. The city's economic opportunities analysis forecasts that job growth needs will be at least 6,100 additional jobs by 2035, putting us at around 18,000 jobs from the 12,000. As a landlocked community with a limited supply of industrial land, we need to be proactive in our efforts to preserve employment land and accommodate this growth. Alternatively, the city's housing residential needs analysis indicates a need for 1,150 new housing units by 2036, of which we have approximately 400 units expected in some newly proposed multifamily residential developments in the next couple of years. The Tacoma Station Area Plan that was completed in 2000 or adopted in 2013 introduced mixed-use residential into the north portion of the NMIA to support transit-oriented development near that Tacoma Station. In that area, in any area, transit-oriented development is the driving force around mixed-use residential to really make it work. And so that's why I think a key decision was made to put residential up there. The introduction of residential into the NME zone, the southern portion of the zone that we'll be talking about tonight, could encourage gentrification. When employment opportunities are limited, a community is more likely to become a bedroom community. As more residential uses move in, the more likely other uses will be pushed out. Milwaukee is uniquely positioned currently as a net importer of jobs, but we're concerned if we don't maintain that and we don't create additional job opportunities for residents, we could lose that unique situation, especially since only about 7% of our current workforce live and work in Milwaukee today. Also, industrial land is typically located on highly constrained areas such as floodplains and on brownfields or near heavy traffic. The proposed North Milwaukee employment zone includes increased flexibility and uses from the current manufacturing zone. We're proposing to increase heights from 45 feet to 90 feet and adding uses of office and commercial. Additionally, the NMIA is experiencing an extremely low vacancy rate with increasing industrial and flex space demand from businesses seeking to expand to relocate from neighboring cities. We hear this, we get calls about this. And we also have been receiving numerous state and regional leads for industrial and flex space throughout this last year, but we've only been able to submit for 2 of those because we don't have enough supply to meet those needs. So as we set that detail, wanted to provide a few case studies that you'll recognize from a neighbor, just to kind of show what's happened in those areas. The Pearl District, many of us are familiar with that, 285 acres. Unlike the NMIA, the Pearl District, as we know it today, had abandoned warehouses and underused industrial sites in the late 1980s. Artists began moving into the area, and then it became the focus of planning efforts. While this area is acclaimed for its transformation and its role it played in Portland's housing strategy and achieving regional and state goals for growth management, now 30 years later, it's also a stark example of what happens to industrial land. Many people have been quoted as saying, once industrial land is gone, it becomes nearly impossible to reclaim. The push for smart growth planning can overlook industrial needs, as highlighted in the Journal of the American Planning Association article, Smart Growth's Blind Side. Although development pressures to convert industrial land to higher densities and other uses persist, the national economic crisis has led to a call for strengthening manufacturing and a need to strengthen manufacturing. There's also been a decline in the non-industrial infill development that epitomizes smart growth projects. Also in a blog by a professor from Queens College on Planetizen on why city industrial land matters. While we often assume the combination of mass deindustrialization and high land costs often preclude industrial employment, many of our major cities and metro areas remain centers of industrial production. Further, manufacturing remains one of the key pathways for poor immigrant communities to claim a spot in urban economies. But this doesn't just happen without policies to support and maintain industrial and employment land, as the NMIA plan promotes. South Waterfront, also in Portland, is another example. The concern is that the introduction of non-industrial allowances end up discouraging industrial investment and facilitating industrial conversion. While we see this in many Portland examples, Portland has also taken a larger policy position on industrial sanctuaries to tighten their industrial zoning and support middle wage job retention and growth, something that Milwaukee's not proposing, an industrial sanctuary. But if Milwaukee is looking for more mixed employment and mixed use development opportunities, the lower property values of industrial areas would make that easier. And so we just need to be cognizant of the decisions that we're making. The added uncertainty for existing and new businesses in decisions about continuing or expanding in the NMIA are also important to keep in mind if we don't have defined policies in place to help them with that certainty and risk. Industrial protection measures can help give businesses the certainty that their facilities will not be in danger of being zoned out of their current sites and that future sites for expansion will be available if they need it as they grow. We are hearing stories from Portland businesses similar to that reported by the Oregonian about Redmond's Creative Woodworking Northwest. They moved to the Central East Side more than two decades ago for cheap land and proximity to customers and downtown. Now he's saying that the owner of that is saying that the city is suffocating them slowly with narrowing streets to accommodate new housing that make maneuvering trucks and getting goods and services to his business difficult. We also received some testimony for this hearing from Casa Bruno, a wine distributor who just moved into the NMIA from Portland into the the NME zone, and they've reported experiencing similar pressures, which is why they've moved into Milwaukee. And finally, the Central East Side. It's described as an international hotspot for significant innovation, sustainable industries, and entrepreneurship, offering manufacturing jobs in the core while encouraging diversity of other users. Preserved historic buildings coexist among new multi-story developments, and extensive public transit systems make the area more accessible to employees and visitors. The Central East Side has a unique and rare example of a historic and active industrial district preserved in the heart of a major city. While the district is preliminary zoned for industrial use and has been classified as an industrial sanctuary, there are retail and commercial corridors that thread through the district and create a balance of uses. The district has the capacity for incubating new businesses and pioneering innovations and creating employment as the population grows. According to their vision statement, though, for the Central East Side Industrial Council, the district is surrounded by residential neighborhoods in all directions, and there's no shortage of residential options close by. While current zoning allows for additional residential development, residential expansion is the single biggest threat to the district due to inherent conflicts and will attract non-complementary services and retail businesses to the district. This is what their vision statement says. So the Central East Side has actually served as an important case study for the NMIA planning process and as a model for inner city economic development. However, some of these identified issues and conflicts are still playing out and serve as an important reminder that we need to be proactive as we plan for the NMIA. Transitioning to the proposed NMIA plan changes and code amendments before you, I wanted to summarize some of the amendments that you have in your packet and that are before you. The redlined NMIA plan includes some of the elements from the Tacoma Station Area plan that were not specifically addressed in the framework plan from July. The purpose of this reconciliation is to repeal the Tacoma Station Area Plan and its associated documents and adopt only one ancillary document as part of the comprehensive plan. We will be providing a revised version, clean version of the NMIA plan before the next meeting, the next hearing on the 20th. We also have updates to the transportation system plan to include where the TSP references the Tacoma Station Area Plan and or to reflect the projects identified in the NMIA plan. Updates to the comprehensive plan include updating Chapter 4, land use and economic base and industrial element, deleting references to that Tacoma Station Area Plan and the Tacoma Station Area and replacing them with references to the NMIA where appropriate. Also includes amending the Tacoma Station Area, which I know Vera has a map that will highlight that. A little more specific on the NMIA plan changes. The NMIA plan is the next iteration of the NMIA framework plan from July. We are working to streamline the document, removing appendices and references to standalone background documents such as the existing conditions report as necessary, and then throughout the document noting the repeal of the Tacoma Station Area Plan. We also added a natural features map and narrative and updated the new zoning names for the mixed-use Tacoma Station Area and the North Milwaukie Employment Zone. We've inserted some figures for different cross-sections that came from Tacoma Station Area Plan for Ochoco, Main, Mailwell Drive, Stubb Street. And we also inserted some concepts for ODOT and Ochoco and the Main Street alignments. The Transportation System Plan is the city's long-term plan for transportation improvements and includes policies and projects that could be implemented throughout the CIP, private development, or grant funding. It is the guiding policy document for long-term transportation planning and represents the city's goals and policies while outlining and prioritizing proposed improvements for pedestrian, bicycle, public transit, motor vehicle, and freight systems. The NMIA plan includes several implementation strategies to improve circulation in the NMIA, including vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle connectivity. In order to improve these strategies and move these forward, the projects must also be included in the transportation system plan. And the proposed projects will be added to the overall list of projects, not necessarily identified as in priority order, but listed. And then the comprehensive plan amendments include changing existing policies that refer to the Tacoma Station Area as it relates to the previous Tacoma Station Area Plan, and a new objective is proposed in the economic base and industrial commercial land use element, Objective 17, to adopt and implement the NMIA plan. Amendments are also proposed for two comprehensive plan maps, an amendment to map 8 for land use to revise the boundary of the Tacoma Station Area, and a new map 10 identifying the North Milwaukie industrial area. Now Vera will present on the code amendments and the key questions for council.
Does anyone need a break? Are we good to go? Okay. Just checking. All right.
I need some heat, though. It's cold up here.
I can't help you there.
Usually it's only me.
No, we're
all right.
About putting my wool coat over my lap.
All right, I'm going to talk about the zoning code amendments. Generally, we're doing a couple of different things. We're reducing the total number of zones in the NMIA from 5 down to 2, a new North Milwaukie Employment Zone, the NME, and a new Tacoma Station Area Mixed-Use Zone, the MUTZA. We're proposing to delete the Tacoma Station Area Overlay Zone because we're making all these combinations down to just the 2 zones with with that overlay gone. We're proposing code language that's consistent with the commercial mixed-use zones, so it's in tabular form format, not all text, like in the current zone, in the current code. And the proposed zoning language also reflects the Planning Commission recommendation to introduce the Millport mixed-use overlay, and I'll be talking about that in a moment. The mixed-use district is intended to take advantage of the unique location near the state train station. Primary uses would include housing, some commercial service-related office use, high-intensity office employment, light industrial uses. This version of the code is a little bit different from the one that was at the work session, and I hope you noted that there's yellow highlighted versions throughout that was intended to highlight the difference between the two codes. We've included some language to talk about light industrial uses in the mixed use, and that's one of the key questions that we'll talk about in a little bit later. The NME zone, or the North Milwaukie Employment Zone, that's our traditional sort of manufacturing area, intended to be involved in production, manufacturing, processing, warehousing, transportation, kind of your traditional manufacturing and industrial zone. Okay. This map shows the current zoning and the proposed zoning. So on the left, you'll see the current zoning. You'll see that we have 3 sub-areas, the MTSA sub-areas 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then the M zone, the manufacturing zone. The proposed zoning combines the sub-areas into the mixed-use area in the northeast, and then creates this NME, or the employment zone, in the south. And you'll see in the southwest corner, or southwest quadrant, that's the recommended Millport mixed-use overlay that the Planning Commission submitted forward for council consideration. In the way we sort of thought that we might structure these hearings, I'll just kind of briefly talk about the uses and development and design standards. Figured that would be something that we could more kick around a little bit in more detail at the next hearing and really focus in on those key questions for tonight. But just generally, as far as the permitted uses, development standards, we're generally reflecting the existing zoning. We've only tweaked a few things. We are, though, proposing additional office uses and limited commercial uses to be permitted in that NME, or that employment area. Currently, that's the manufacturing area, and that has very limited or no allowances for those commercial or retail and office uses. So essentially, the proposed code is upzoning that M zone, that manufacturing zone, to allow a little more flexibility and allowing that additional retail and office development beyond what is permitted today. The development standards, we are proposing to establish a hierarchy of key streets with associated urban design standards, and we're proposing to introduce some minimum setbacks, some parking restrictions, frontage occupancy, again, on those key streets to kind of create that urban design standard on some of those key streets that we've identified. We've made some adjustments to the base maximum height in the areas, as well as a minimum height, and proposing a height bonus provision as well within the entire area. As I mentioned, there are some what we're calling key streets in the existing code right now. We're proposing to kind of expand that a little bit and tie some design standards to those key streets. This would require development to be a bit more focused on pedestrian amenities on those streets, while still recognizing that there are still streets in the area that would have majority kind of manufacturing, trucking kinds of uses. So we're understanding that not all of these streets can have that full pedestrian focus, that we need to recognize that there will still be buildings that utilize loading docks and have a high level of truck traffic, and understand that there's a difference between the two.
Vera, what are the circles for?
Oh, those circles are identifying the intersections, so that at those areas, basically the design standards would need to pull kind of around the corners kind of idea. So rather than sort of drawing a line a little ways down what might not be, as example, Mailwell is not identified as a key street, but Main Street is. So the development that would trigger those design standards would need to kind of wrap around onto Mailwell, but rather than sort of graphically show where that might end, we're just kind of identifying the corner. Yeah. The existing MTSA code does include, so those sub-areas 1 through 4. There are some design standards for all new construction and major exterior alterations on, again, in sub-areas 1 through 3 and on Main Street in sub-area 4. The proposed code slightly revises those existing design standards for street-facing facades and corners for development. Again, and those are only applicable on the key streets that we've identified. We've revised the applicability of those design standards. The current code has applicability standards for demolition or replacement of more than 25% of an exterior wall or roof, or a floor addition that exceeds 250 square feet. So we did some thinking about what how that might work, and we're proposing language that we think clarifies the applicability of those standards. We're proposing revisions to ensure that new development complies with the standards, of course, but also provides some thresholds for redevelopment or improvements made to existing buildings. We're trying to recognize that we want to make sure that we're incentivizing, improvements to buildings and so on, but we don't want to disincent any of those improvements because those thresholds are so low. I mean, a 250 square foot addition to an industrial building, and then you're triggering that whole wall. That's a pretty huge disincentive to making improvements. So we're proposing floor area additions in the or demolition or replacement of more than 50% of a wall or roof. In the mixed-use zone, floor area additions that exceed 50% of the existing floor area, or a demolition or replacement of 50%. So you need to do something pretty significant to be triggering that stuff. And then in the manufacturing or in the NME area, we've increased that threshold to 75%. These are big buildings, so you need to be doing more to your building to have to trigger those to those design standards. Those are really large buildings, and we want to make sure that we're not kind of creating this threshold that's so low that an industrial building now has its entire full block wall that's needing to comply because of a threshold that's too low. These numbers we can certainly talk about them, but that's
I guess I don't follow why it's different, why 50 isn't enough. But I mean, I don't want to get into deliberation, but I guess I'd like to know what the thinking was as to why 50 isn't enough.
And we will certainly be talking about that. This is a graphic that just sort of represents how some of those what wall faces would apply and how those would get triggered. So in addition to the rear, to the side, if it's just a small addition, it's just that face. This is really trying to show what would trigger that entire building face to have to comply. Certainly the new construction would have to comply with the design standard, but what is it that's triggering the entire wall? And so this would be also any kind of interior, so a mezzanine that's getting built that's doubling the interior floor square footage. That's a significant investment in the building, and we would like to see that kind of investment still trigger a design improvement to the wall that's facing the street. And again, this is just on the key streets. Okay, this is just a reminder again on the current zoning and our proposed zoning, specifically talking about that the mixed-use overlay. So we're sort of segueing into the key questions. I just wanted to provide an overview of the design development standards. Again, we'll get into more detail on those at the next hearing. Throughout the Planning Commission review process, through the 3 public hearings that were held, testimony was provided in support of a mixed-use overlay in the area in the southwest quadrant that you can see here, the Millport mixed-use overlay. The mixed-use overlay would allow the same development that is permitted in the mixed-use in the north area, the Mutza area, to the exclusion of standalone residential. So the one caveat was that standalone residential would not be permitted in this mixed-use overlay, but essentially the Mutza zoning kind of applies to this overlay.
Can you remind us what the current zoning in that area is right now?
The current zoning in that area right now is M manufacturing.
So it's straight up industrial manufacturing.
Correct, yes. Any kind of office use needs to be directly associated with a manufacturing use. A standalone office or those kinds of things are not permitted in the manufacturing zone.
So in relation to retail, we have some retail there.
We do.
Grandfathered as long as it's there.
Correct. It's pre-existing.
In the current zoning that exists, if they were to rebuild that building with the old zoning, that use would go away, correct?
Next slide. I'm going to answer that question in a second. Yes. Okay. It's a good question. If you could hold it for 1 second. So again, we had testimony provided in support of a mixed-use overlay. Testimony throughout the Planning Commission process was provided by the property owner, specifically a few business owners, and a couple of other interested parties. So we definitely had testimony supporting the mixed-use overlay. No one testified in opposition to the mixed-use overlay during the Planning Commission process. Staff conducted outreach to stakeholders and property owners to discuss the overlay code language, as well as the implications of the floodplain in the area, which we will also talk about in a second. I have a slide for that as well. So the proposed overlay code language is a product of all of that outreach and the testimony provided. The overlay provides very specific language allowing an existing non-conforming development to rebuild. There has been a lot of discussion about existing development in that area, particularly the Mill store. Per the code right now, Title 19.800, that's our non-conforming section of the code, non-conforming development may be rebuilt if it's destroyed through natural causes, a fire, a flood, something like that. So our current code right now would allow for that non-conforming development to rebuild.
In that instance, but if,
correct.
For example, they wanted to update the building.
Right.
We wanted to have a newer, better building and have the same use in it. Our current code, as it exists today, would not allow that, correct?
It's considered a non-conforming development. Any expansion of a non-conforming use would require a variance in the current code. The proposed code does not change that non-conforming section of the code. If something happened through a fire or a natural hazard or something destroyed that building, the non-conforming section of the code would still apply under the proposed code, and they would be able to rebuild. So we're not affecting that at all.
So the overlay,
I think this question was supposed to be commercial. If you read the question again, it says residential use.
No.
Okay.
No, that's right.
So I want to clarify what you just said.
Okay.
So the overlay, as it's proposed, as it came through the Planning Commission,
yes,
also doesn't include retail?
The proposed overlay includes very specific language that would allow for the rebuilding of a non-conforming retail development on the site.
So
on the mill end site,
correct,
but not the other parts of that overlay zone.
Right.
So it calls out the Mill store in essence.
By use, it does. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yes. I mean, the discussion about the mixed-use overlay is really about allowing residential uses in this, but a lot of the discussion that we had throughout the testimony was about the future of the Mill store and a large retailer that's currently existing in the area. So while the question about the mixed-use overlay is about residential, and that had a lot to do with what Amy was talking about, there was also a significant amount of discussion about allowing the Mill store or a large retailer to be able to redevelop on the property. So I just wanted to be clear that our current code allows that development to rebuild under a natural disaster type of situation, and our proposed code doesn't change that. The proposed code with the mixed-use overlay has very specific language allowing for the Mill store to rebuild without a flood or a fire or something like that. So is that clear? Okay.
Yeah, so that makes sense. Yeah. And further clarification, that's not necessarily tied to residential. That
correct,
could happen regardless of any decision around residential.
Right. We don't require mixed-use development in that mixed-use overlay. Standalone retail is permitted, and the code language for the overlay very specifically calls out the rebuilding of that retail development without associated residential.
If it were a permitted use instead of a non-conforming use, and it needed to be rebuilt for any reason, could it then also be rebuilt?
Under the mixed-use overlay, it could be rebuilt, yes.
Thank you.
But it's a good question, and that's key question 1A. There's a slide for that, too. But
I'm glad you clarified that, because some of the comments in the Planning Commission hearings and some of the comments we've gotten by email indicate there's some disinformation out there about their right to rebuild right now.
And I want to be very clear about that. And if there's still confusion, I'm happy to continue to clarify that, no problem. Sort of embedded within this key question one is this discussion of the floodplain. That has come up quite a bit as well. And some properties in this mixed-use overlay are in the floodplain. What the graphic shows you, sort of what is the white blob, is the floodplain as it affects the area. You'll see sort of in that kind of northwest corner, there's 3 properties that are not touched by the floodplain. That's sort of the outer boundary of this mixed-use overlay. So that triangle that you see is the mixed-use overlay. Thank you. So as being outlined, thank you.
So the floodplain actually extends past the proposed overlay?
It does, yes. It goes north, OLCC, it's all along the Johnson Creek area, yeah. The floodplain code, the city code, floodplain code, would allow reconstruction within the floodplain as long as there's no additional impact to the floodplain over what is there today. So, and by that, I mean the displacement that's there right now, and the displacement being the building or whatever development is happening. So this would allow, our code would allow reconstruction within the floodplain, again, as long as there's no more displacement than what is there today. That's what our current code says right now, and that kind of goes with our non-conforming section of the code.
They could build higher, right? When you say no more displacement.
Displacement, right.
Okay.
Yes.
And the footprint.
So sort of so this slide within the presentation is just intended to clarify the issue of construction in the floodplain. That's come up quite a bit as well. Our proposed code amendments for the NMIA change nothing with regards to construction in the floodplain. That's just what our current code says. Our city code was found to be compliant with Metro Title III, which requires a balance of cut and fill in the floodplain. So we are compliant with Metro Code as it relates to construction in floodplain. Our code, the zoning code and so on, is a regulatory mechanism. It's not an economics mechanism. It's really about how do we regulate construction in the floodplain. And from what I understand from our floodplain manager and the building official, there are numerous construction options that our code would allow as it relates to construction in the floodplain. And that concludes what I know about construction in the floodplain. But our floodplain manager
is hanging outside the door.
He is here. We were sort of joking if he was going to actually be in the room at this point. But so he is here to answer questions if you have specific questions about construction in the floodplain. But I hope that's clear, kind of what I've generally talked about here.
In the Planning Commission proceedings, there was a little bit of a disputed battle of memos or something between Mr. Eaton and someone from hired by Mr. Dietrich. Correct. Was that resolved? Does everyone come to agreement with Mr. Eaton's interpretation, or is there still some dispute on that?
So the way I can speak to that is that staff, we wanted to make sure that we were clear, or if there was still further discussion that needed to happen. Amy did send an email to some representatives from the Dietrich family that had been present at the hearings, and just wanted to make sure that this is what we said, this is what Chuck had written in the memo. Are we all clear? And we didn't hear anything to the negative or to counter that, I don't think. Amy, if you wanted to, we wanted to make sure exactly this to answer this question.
Yeah, we just responded. We have copies if that's helpful, but that we were under the impression that there was a difference of opinion and in how the floodplain was addressed, and we wanted to make sure that was reconciled, and we didn't hear back.
Okay. And we did offer to have a meeting or conversation or something. So, so I hope that means that we're all on the same page.
Okay, so I guess, Chuck, don't go away until after testimony is over, because I'll want to know whether there's agreement when it's all said and done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great.
Please. And thank you.
And then there was a sort of a key question, 1A. Councilor Parks, this sort of gets to your question, I think, about there's sort of another way that we might be able to address the future of the Mill-End store within the code. We've provided one mechanism, which is this overlay, which would also allow for some residential development. So there's that track that could be put for. This key question relates to adding language to the code that would list bulky fabric stores and retail textile, essentially the Mill-End store, as a use description as a permitted use in the NME, and then outright permit permit that use, thereby allowing it to rebuild in the future in its current location up to its current size, whether or not the mixed-use overlay exists. So there's another track that the council might want to consider as well. We would note that adding that kind of a permitted use would also permit something like a Michael's, Joann's Fabrics. I mean, that kind of, it's a use description. It's a retail use description, obviously. It's not just for one particular retailer themselves, but that's another way that we could be able to address the concern about the future of the Mill End store on the site. So it's something for your consideration within the code, and we'd be able to, if that's, we haven't prepared that code language, we've sort of prepared a way that we could get there, and if that's something that council would like us to pursue, we could come back at the next meeting with some draft language that would do that. Yes.
So before you move on to other questions, I just, in all the testimony at the Planning Commission, it was all about Mill End store.
It was.
It wasn't about any of the rest of that overlay zone. No. So is there any consideration of just doing an overlay? I guess, yeah, just doing an overlay for just one parcel. And
there was some brief discussion about that. The Planning Commission thought that it was more fair to kind of to broaden that overlay geography, so it didn't feel so much like spot zoning and to the benefit of one particular property owner for one particular business that as in a larger area you were
but
sort of
isn't
spreading
most of that property within that zone one owner?
A portion of it, actually, the area that was covered by floodplain is one owner, and then the other three properties are not. So they are separate.
So did the concept of making it an outright allowed use come up in the planning commission?
It did not. No, the overlay was really the discussion.
Seems like a cleaner way to do that in any case.
Yep. The overlay was talked about. There was discussion about the economics of rebuilding and needing the residential development to balance the numbers as well. The Planning Commission was, if you watch the video, we're very thoughtful about how and where this residential use could be applied, and they made statements and sort of findings, within their discussion about the proximity of this area to downtown, other residential areas, the 17th Avenue bike path. I mean, there were reasons where that they expressed that residential uses also made sense in this area as well. So, but it's a good question. But it being an outright permitted use for that particular, that was not an avenue that came up during the Planning Commission hearings.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. A few other key questions for council. Generally wanted to know if there were any questions or concerns, certainly about the NMIA plan and the edits and changes that we're proposing to kind of compress and combine with the TSAP and make that one standing ancillary document. If you had any questions or concerns about the changes to the actual comp plan language itself or the transportation plan, we do raise the question about compliance with Goal 12 for transportation, and we did have a transportation analysis that was part of that memorandum, was part of the package of information that you had. We did present all of our functional plan analysis to Metro, and they did not have any questions or concerns about that the plan and the code amendments do comply with the various sections of the functional plan, including transportation.
And if we were to do an overlay that allowed residential, would that need to be revisited? The transportation compliance?
Mm-hmm. Well, except that office uses and so on are also allowed. So I think that we end up balancing out the impacts based on the number of trips that are generated by both of those different uses. Office uses are actually a higher trip generator than residential.
Than residential.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are proposing a change to the station area itself, the boundary. The existing Tacoma Station area, which you can see on the left on map 8 of the comprehensive plan, essentially shares the boundary of the entire MTSA zone. However, much of that area is well outside your typical half-mile kind of walking distance from the Tacoma Light Rail Station. So we're proposing to revise that boundary to only include the properties that are within a half mile of the station to more accurately reflect the station area, what a station area ought to be. And that's what you're seeing in proposed on map 10, that revised boundary of the Tacoma Station area.
Which street is that? That's the cross street at the southern boundary on the right-hand side?
That's Mailwell.
Mailwell.
Yep.
So this is putting some new property into the MUTSA that wasn't in.
It's not, this isn't a zoning change. It's
Okay.
not MUTSA. It's just identifying what the station area itself is. And what that does is by identifying a station area and, with Metro, there are potential, funding opportunities and so on because you're within sort of that station area, walking, bicycling distance to a light rail station. Okay. So, but it seemed to better reflect what we might traditionally think of as an actual station area rather than that entire MTSA zone that we see in the current code.
More closely represents the area that's already zoned, allows for residential and in that transit-oriented development.
Change that MUTSA.
It does not. This doesn't affect the zoning piece of it at all. This is
geographically, it just represents the area in the north that's already more transit-oriented.
Yep. Okay. At the work session at the last council meeting, there were some questions regarding the list of industrial uses that we've permitted in that mixed use area. Again, back to that kind of conflict of industrial uses with residential uses. And this idea of should there be a different list and so on. There was particularly, of course, concern with heavy industrial uses being allowed in an area where there would be residential. And a suggestion was made that perhaps an alternate list or alternative list of permitted industrial manufacturing uses specific to the MUTSA would be appropriate. So what the proposed code that you have in tonight's package, we've done a couple of different things to try to get to that issue. We included language in various sections that address the concern in the purpose statement of the MUTSA at the very beginning of the code. We've added language that describes the intent of light manufacturing uses in the MUTSA and the general expectation that external impacts would be minimized. So it's sort of a purpose statement, but we're trying to get at a description of what we mean by industrial uses within that MUTSA. We've added a footnote associated with residential development in the MUTSA that includes language requiring, and I borrowed this actually from code from a different community that required a declaration of use to be signed and recorded, which would serve as notice to residential development that's located adjacent to industrial development that there is a declaration and an acknowledgement that you're in a residential, that you have residential uses or you're living in a residential development that is proximate to some industrial or manufacturing uses. We've identified manufacturing, production, and service and repair uses as limited uses in the MUTSA. And then the associated language that goes with that would prohibit certain of those uses within the MUTSA, such as fuel oil distributors, solid fuel yards, manufacturing of such products as chemicals, paints, adhesives, aluminum, sort of your metal works, that kind of thing. So rather than create a different list of manufacturing that's allowed, we've sort of pulled out the ones that we thought might be kind of the more noxious kinds of ones and have those not be permitted within the MUTSA. And we can certainly talk about those and see if we've captured those correctly. But maybe that's a different way of getting to the concern and making those kinds of uses limited within the MUTSA. And then finally, we're proposing to add a detailed development standard to residential development that would require new residential development that's adjacent to existing manufacturing, that they are required to install visual screening where they're adjacent to loading docks or access areas or so on. So kind of in some ways putting the onus onto the residential development to acknowledge that you're coming in where there is already existing manufacturing. So it's part of your site plan is to include that visual screening to the existing manufacturing development. So hopefully we're sort of balanced what might be coming in as manufacturing or industrial uses into the MUTSA, but also onto the new residential that might be coming in where there's existing manufacturing or industrial. And again, we can certainly talk about that, but that's how we propose to address that concern that the council had.
I'm sorry, what's the signed declaration of uses? I didn't.
That there's a declaration is signed by the property owner and any tenants in the residential development acknowledging that I'm a tenant or I'm an owner in a residential development that is in a zone that also allows for manufacturing and production uses. Yeah. We have language similar to it in our existing code, but this language was actually written, or it suggested something a bit tighter. It required recording and I mean, I haven't written the actual language itself, but the way it was referenced in a code that I saw, it provided a bit more kind of structure to what was required. There was a question at the last meeting talking about the minimum building height standard. We're proposing a 25-foot minimum building height as a way of, and there was a suggestion that maybe that minimum should be taller, effectively requiring to some degree multi-story development, including industrial development. So we're certainly open to discussing it. 25 feet isn't necessarily a two-story building, or it could be a two-story or a very tall single-story. The goal was to not allow for new construction that is literally a single-story building. We really wanted some height and something that would provide more bulk and depth in the area. But we can certainly talk about something that's higher than that, higher than the 25 feet. The concern might be, though, that if we create a minimum height that is much taller than what an industrial developer might need. I mean, some certainly need a taller interior ceiling height, and that's fine. They wouldn't be precluded from building that. But if we require it, we just want to be careful that we're not disincenting, new development by creating a minimum height that's too high than some people might need. But we can certainly discuss that. And that was the last of the key questions. And we have the general, your decision-making options and so on that we always have. So we can certainly go back to the key questions to start and go through those, or certainly, Mr. Mayor, however you'd like to go through the rest of this. But that concludes the key questions and concludes our presentation for now.
Well, technically speaking, until we hear testimony, we really don't want to be having conversations or giving you answers to where we're thinking right now.
Great.
I know that a lot of the people, or at least I'm getting a vibe that a lot of the people that are here in concern for the Mill End store. And I think this council probably shares that concern. So I'm wondering if, in the interest of saving a whole lot of people a whole lot of time, we do address that one. At least as an interest in the possibility of one or the other of the proposals.
I think in the interest of having the cleanest possible record in case of an appeal, we just want to do this as we would a normal hearing. I absolutely understand that there could be an increased efficiency, but...
5-minute break. Yeah, let's take a break. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Thanks, you guys. Any more questions, anybody? Before they go?
Not right now. No.
All right, so we're going to take a 5-minute recess, and we'll be back in 5. call it back to order, please?
My son came down from northern Washington.
So now you have script to read.
Yeah, now I have script to read.
It's way cool.
Council will now take public testimony on the hearing topic. I will recognize those wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through me. When you come to the table, state your name and city of residence for the record. Presentation times for all speakers will be limited to representatives of groups who will be limited to 6 minutes, and individuals will be limited to 3 minutes. Please confine your remarks to the relevant criteria, avoid repetition and irrelevant information, and avoid presenting new evidence which council cannot consider. In addition, documents or evidence are provided by any party. The council will not consider or rely on such evidence in rendering a decision on this appeal. Evidence means facts, documents, data, or other information offered to demonstrate compliance or noncompliance with the standard believed by the proponent to be relevant to the decision. So now that I've just read that, I actually have a question.
Right. So I want to clarify something. This is not an appeal.
That's what I thought.
This is a change. This is a change to your code. This is a change to your comprehensive plan, and that normally and must go through your planning commission to city council because we're in the Metro Service District in coordination with Metro, as well as to DLCD. So that this is an adversarial proceeding that's been appealed to you. This is a normal part of your comp.
So new data and information is allowed.
Correct.
Right? And what else is different from what I just said? So basically, from what I just said, give me your name, your city of residence, 6 minutes, 3 minutes. Those are all correct.
Right.
Otherwise, I think you can pretty much ignore the rest of what I just said.
Right. So staff has brought up some key questions, and so members of the audience are free to address those, but are also free to address any other element of this comprehensive plan proposed amendment.
Yeah. Thanks.
That is a call by the mayor. So, Mayor, there was a question about what constitutes a group for the timing.
Typically, it's an organization,
Formalized
a formalized organization, like Janet Labar is here representing GPI tonight, Greater Portland Inc. So. Somebody like that is typically considered a group, or one of the neighborhood district associations, or somebody representing, I don't know, the Sierra Club, or something like that.
Downtown Milwaukie Business.
Downtown Milwaukie Business Association. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So, have we received any additional correspondence on this topic besides what we received in our email today?
Besides that, no.
No. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to do it.
Actually, Mayor, I have to correct that. I did receive a phone call from PC Cast Parts earlier today, but they did not take a stance. They just had questions about what the proceedings dates would be and times, and if they were to submit any testimony, when it would be due by, when you'd be making a decision.
Okay.
So there was no content around policy. It was simply questions.
And you handed out a statement to us at the beginning of this meeting from Peter Stark, which I assume he's going to speak to. But
correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to start with, I believe it's Eric Hovey. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
We can wait just a moment to get a graphic up on the screen.
Sure. Is it 3 minutes? So, and is this two different people? Are you Jerry?
I'm Jerry, yes.
So
he'll be next.
Consider 6 minutes for their presentation.
I'll get started here, actually. Again, for the record, my name is Eric Hovey, 2408 Main Street, Vancouver. I've been involved in economic development for more than 40 years, working for the cities of Portland and Vancouver, and then as an independent consultant. And I'm here tonight testifying in support of a Millport mixed-use overlay zone as has been recommended by the Planning Commission. The reason for being here really is related to the issues of being able to redevelop within the floodplain that, as you can see from the map, it's the area in pink, affects both sides of Johnson Creek, so it affects the mill and store, but also the properties immediately to the west, not the little triangle up at the top, but the other property. These properties have been much discussed because of the location within the 100-year floodplain, and here is what we know. First, the area was greatly affected by the flood of 1996. We know that another major flood in the future will further compromise the integrity of these structures, leading some properties to be condemned as unsafe for continued occupancy because they're very close. They were basically very close to the edge before. Second, we know that placing any new industrial building on site simply won't happen. For example, the cost of elevating the mill and store to 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain from a depth now of anywhere from 7 to 10 feet has been estimated at $3 million. This is a cost burden that will be greater than what can be absorbed by any reasonably foreseeable light or heavy industrial use. Industrial reuse of the site simply will not be feasible. Third, we know from the city's own economic consultant, Echo Northwest, that a multi-story industrial office building with parking beneath, like the New York building in Northwest Portland, is not financially feasible. This is because the rents realized will come nowhere close to supporting the cost of development. The only way that a project becomes feasible is if the city or another public agency provides a financial subsidy of $10 to $11 million. I have followed up with the individual at Eco Northwest who conducted this feasibility study for the city. He confirms that their report did not go deeper into an analysis of the floodproofing of buildings on the site because the arm's length speculative developments that we were analyzing, meaning Echo Northwest, were financially underwater as it is. Fourth, we know that redevelopment for office and retail, as well as industrial reuse, is not feasible because the rents will not be high enough to cover the cost of elevating the building and providing parking. The only use that can afford to cover its own cost on an elevated site with structured parking is housing. That is why rezoning the site to allow mixed use with housing is so essential for the flood-impaired properties south of Millport. Finally, we know that if mixed-use redevelopment with housing on NMIA floodplain property is not allowed as recommended by the Planning Commission, the long-term future of these properties is questionable at best. When the next major flood occurs, existing structures will be demolished. At least 100 jobs will be lost at just the Mill End and Corinthian carpet stores alone, and the affected properties will sit vacant. No new jobs, no new investment, no support for NMIA district vitality. In summary, your decision is important to avoid the very real prospect of vacant, derelict, and abandoned properties. Continued economic use should be possible, but this result depends on council's approval of the overlay to allow continued on-site retail textile sales together with mixed-use residential development. Thank you for your consideration. I'll turn it to Jerry.
Jerry Basinger, principal in Basinger Partners Architecture. I have over 40 years experience specializing in retail and mixed-use multifamily projects. So the code, or excuse me, the current condition with the flood presents a challenge. With the overlay, it presents a huge opportunity. So this is an illustration of what would happen here or could happen should the Mill End store need to be rebuilt. We'd have to raise it to a foot above the 100-year flood, which is somewhere between 7 and I would guesstimate more like 10 feet, because you would also want to raise it up to be even with the streets Millport and McLaughlin. So we'd create a hollow space under the building. Rather than fill it, it costs about the same. And in that space, we can park, and we can park about 180 vehicles down there. I'm looking for your page. There it is. Sorry about that. Page down. Well, I don't know how to get the display.
Do you need
Mouse. Jumpy mouse. That it's slideshow.
From the beginning.
From the beginning. It's just not doing any of these things.
Is there something? Oh, wait, click that again. And then resume. See if that advances now?
Jump page down. Okay, sorry about that. All right, the main floor would be roughly a 60,000 square foot retail store. This is at the level of Millport. And we would use some of the floodplain volume created in the footprint of the building to be able to run parking on the surface outside the building that need to be supplemented by some storage volume under that parking. So that is the retail parking that you see. Did change. And above that would be 4 floors of residential in an L-shaped pattern that parallels Millport and McLaughlin. The balance of the roof over the retail could be used to create some outdoor courtyard area for the residents of the residential. And you can see color-coded, the retail level is yellow and the retail parking is yellow. And then the parking, that section actually goes beyond the footprint of the building. We since dialed it back, so the section would need to be updated. And finally, this is a vision of what that would look like in terms of bulk if you put 4 floors of residential on top of the store. Note that we've got a lot of glass. The store would be open to the streets and inviting both as a place to live within an industrial district and as a entry marker for the city of Milwaukee. And it's a little hard to read, but up at the top of that building, it says "Welcome to Milwaukee," because we would see it as a landmark that really keynotes the entry into downtown Milwaukee. That's the potential.
Any questions?
Quick couple. How many units of living are you thinking about? I mean, just approximately
we show
what does this look like?
140. It was really just a test diagram based on average unit sizes between 650 and 750. We think you're outside of the more intense areas where smaller units would be more desirable, and a little bit bigger unit, it gives you a reason to want to live here as an alternative to living in, say, Central East Side where my office is.
And then just another quick question. Would you mind going back to one slide if you can, just to get a visual? Actually, maybe the one before that is even better. Approximately how much distance is between the building and the creek, if you can sort of give us an approximate idea of a setback there?
The parking rows are about 60 feet, so that looks like it's a little more than that, maybe 70 feet from the closest point of the building to Johnson Creek.
Thank you.
I guess I had a question for Mr. Hovey. I think most of us probably listened to the Planning Commission, so we've heard you testify a few times now, and I guess I wondered if, I didn't see it in our packet, did you ever provide any financial analysis of office versus residential, or are you just going along with the Echo Northwest report?
Kind of 2 observations on that. In connection with the notion of doing a multi-story industrial office development, I think we're going along with the Echo Northwest report. And as I mentioned, I've talked to Echo Northwest about that just to make sure I had a clear understanding of what they had evaluated. It seems to me that their numbers are probably reasonable, with the exception that they clearly acknowledge that they did not fully address the unique circumstances of the site with respect to the floodplain. So there may be, while they did address the cost of doing structured parking, there may be some extra costs related to mitigation within the floodplain that are not fully reflected in their estimate, which would just increase the subsidy need if that's the case.
And what was their estimated square foot rental on if it were office versus residential?
I don't remember precisely what their rental rates are. In fact, I'm not sure that it's not even directly stated in the, I don't think it's directly stated in the analysis as to what it was. I can tell you this, though. I have looked at this and compared it to, I have done some independent analysis of my own. I compared this, for example, to the New York building in Northwest Portland, which Echo Northwest says was sort of the model for what they put on the site here. And basically, the rental rates of the New York building are about twice what industrial and even flex industrial rates are in Milwaukee today. So there is a vast difference.
Like what is that?
The lease rates on the New York building, they range depending upon the size of the space involved. When I did this work was about last June. At that time, the rental rates were for smaller spaces of less than 2,500 square feet were close to $17 a square foot per year. And if you got up to a 10,000 square foot space, they were $14.40 a square foot a year. And on top of that, you need to add $4.50 to $6 a square foot in CAM or common area maintenance charges. So you're really into the 20 plus a square foot rental range, which is well above the industrial rates, for example, in the Clackamas, Milwaukie area, which, as we heard, for this area are around 40 cents a square foot, $5, which would be $5 a square foot per year. So it's almost 4 times that. Or if you look at the average for Clackamas, Milwaukie as a whole, including all other industrial areas, are at about $10 a square foot. So it would be at least roughly double what those rates are. So I mean, there's just a vast difference in terms of the rental rates.
Right, but I was asking about office, not.
Oh, okay. And if you want to ask about office, the office rental rate for Milwaukie is about $21 a square foot for office space, and that's for Clackamas and Milwaukie. That compares to Portland CBD, for example. It's $31 a square foot per square foot.
But so that $21, and actually we have a recent office study that the city had done more recently, and says, I mean, it's not targeted on the NMIA, it's a general citywide one, but says 24 to 26 is not an unreasonable expectation for office space, for newly built office space. I compared that with Cruiseway, which I mentioned earlier, and that's above what they're getting, some properties in Cruiseway.
Yeah, I think Cruiseway, when you look at office space in this metro region, and office space is very much gets clustered. It is very difficult to do sort of one-offs at an isolated location and get premium rates. You might get it from a kind of a corporate user that wants to create their own identity, but as a speculative development, it just doesn't happen.
Questions? Yeah, I do. So when you talk about the economics, of course, you're talking about the economics as of today, not 5 years or 10 years from now. And I think Mr. Duffy, if I'm saying your name correct, mentioned that, we're looking at this potentially as a long-term issue and that maybe the rates will catch up. Do you agree with that?
I think rates have gone up considerably with the recovery for office space as well as industrial space within the region. It's not a question of whether rates as a whole go up, because costs are going to be going up at the same time, but it really is a question of, does Milwaukie make a quantum leap in terms of its rates compared to the rest of the region? In other words, do you come up to rates, for example, that a New York building is able to get in Northwest Portland that has the amenities of close proximity to housing, proximity to cultural activities, and proximity to retail, which is a key piece. If you look at the marketing that companies like McAdams Forbes have done for that property, are doing for that particular property. So it's a quite case of really raising the bar for Milwaukie relative to the rest of the region to frankly get up to a par with sort of central city Portland types of properties to be able to justify a project like what you'd be talking about.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't have any right now. No, thanks.
All right, thank you very much. Peter. Yeah.
Peter Stark, 2939 Northwest Cornell Road, Portland. I sat on the NMI committee, and I just want to give you a little history here. Without this overlay, the city may lose a significant landmark business and eliminate hundreds of jobs currently in the floodplain. The concern regarding the floodplain was first discussed during the NMI meetings, and I remember that Wilda announced that there was a vote taken with City Council that essentially eliminated housing as an option. I've called and confirmed that out of the members that were represented in the NMIA, 100% of them that are independent from City Council's directive do not include housing in the floodplain, or that didn't include housing in the floodplain, supported this overlay. So the point that I'm trying to make, having sat on the committee and talked to many of you and expressed what we're trying to accomplish, if this overlay does not proceed, if we're not able to come up with a way to subsidize the additional cost to develop on the site, then there will be no development on the site if a flood takes down the building. And that point was made in front of the NMIA, and it was made repeatedly in front of Planning Commission as well as this council. And we're just trying to assure that the mill and store can continue to be a viable site within Milwaukie. And just to answer some other questions that have come up so far, the floodplain expansion that was proposed by the Planning Commission was something that they felt was necessary. I think from the point of view of the owner, we're really just trying to protect the ability to stay in Milwaukie. The other question about proximate industrial lands, I did a lot of the language in the Central East Side, and I can tell you there are ways to protect the industrial businesses, and some of those were mentioned here, and still keep residential within proximity of industrial uses. We talked to every business owner in the NMIA, and they all are supportive of this option. We also directly talked to the industrial users that are across the street, as well as across 99. There's no opposition. We even got an email back from Metro stating that they would not oppose housing at this location. Now, all of that leads up to the fact that the decision is simple. If you allow this overlay, you're providing an opportunity for the store to remain. If you don't allow the overlay, the cost to rebuild will exceed the ability to replace the building. Thank you.
Thanks. Any questions?
Did you provide the email from Metro?
I got it literally a half hour before I got here. I'm happy to forward it. Free to look.
That'd be great. And when you say that you have called around and confirmed that everyone supports housing that is, and I think the way you say it, independent of the city directive? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of went through that quickly. I'm trying to keep my time short because 3 minutes is not enough to cover everything. There were 20 on the committee. Out of that 20, 5 members on that committee were private business owners or representatives of private businesses or properties. The remaining 15 were county, metro, state representatives from the city. So out of those 5 that I talked to, all of them were supportive. And it's been noted that it was a minority group in support of this overlay or housing in the southern area. That's true. But it's true because after the announcement was made that the City Council made a directive call and a vote, and that was announced at the meeting prior to the final set of NMI meetings, it put, I won't say a bias, but it made it difficult for other representatives to counter against the directive of City Council, and that was a concern. So we just want to make sure that you understand that there's a lot of support from the community, support from the businesses, and a lot of support, obviously, by those that represent private businesses on the NMI committee, or NMIA committee.
So a couple of follow-up questions. The 5 that you're talking about, have they submitted testimony, written testimony, or are you saying, I know you said you called them and you've confirmed it.
Some of them are here tonight, and if you wish, I know I could get some written testimony if you want something to identify their support. But I can tell you, Greg Carlson, Alpine Foods, Jimmy Bruce, who is here tonight, Rick Anderson with Anderson Dye, obviously myself, Denise Emmerling Baker, who represented the Historic Milwaukie Neighborhood District Association, and Dan Canfield, who owns the Stone Fabrication Company. Okay. So those are people I've talked to, and all 5 of them were on the committee.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't want to belabor the point, but when you say something, again, this council's directive and the council took a vote and that caused a bias. Can you tell me the timing, because I don't recall that.
This is from memory, and I can certainly get back to council with an exact, and maybe Will remembers, but I believe it was the 5th meeting of the NMIA, and I raised a red flag, and I said I was surprised that a vote could be taken before the committee had concluded their deliberation. And
I'm surprised by that too, because I don't recall it occurring.
It did occur, and it was brought out, and we've had subsequent meetings since that, and we on the 6th meeting, the final meeting of the NMIA, housing again, and this flood zone was brought up again, and we put up on the board that continued to be a concern, and again, it was minority support, and there were further discussions beyond the NMI meeting, initiated by staff, actually, as well as some of the council members, to try to figure out how we can come up with a solution. The solution is pretty much what we see now, and we had at some point at least some support from some council, and later that obviously that didn't happen over the summer. We still have support from Planning Commission. We think that it's a reasonable compromise to allow some kind of an overlay. We're okay with the sunset. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. But at least it gives the owner an opportunity to keep the store in Milwaukie. I mean, that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Howard Dietrich.
Which one do you want?
Well, I don't know.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Howard Dietrich, the husband of Nancy Bishop Dietrich, who owns the Mill End Store and Oregon Worsted Company. My wife has asked me to appear before you today. She is not here because she's in New York buying fabric to take care of her employees and customers. But she will present some video tape in a little bit. Oregon Worsted is 100 years old and was established by her grandfather, Roy Bishop, who co-founded Pendleton Woolen Mills, E.B. McNaughton, who founded First National Bank of Oregon, Carl Zentbauer, a founder of Jansen Knitting Mills. It was principally a wool yarn manufacturing plant here and other places in the country. We moved from the site at Tacoma to the current site because the ODOT and TriMet both condemned the properties and required that we moved. We were encouraged at the time we moved by the city mayor and the planning staff to remodel the vacant former Omark Industries building and conduct our operations where it is today. We rebuilt the building and added one of the first site's stormwater treatment systems in Milwaukie and daylight systems to conserve energy. The Mill End Store is the largest fabric display in the west of the Mississippi in the United States. Most of our 200,000 customers come from Tri-County area, but many come on tour buses from Washington, Idaho, and Northern California. We also have a corporate R&D facility for one of the largest carpet manufacturers in the boating and car industries in the United States. That carpet company also is over 100 years, and its owner is here, Rob Pickens. If you could stand, Rob. Thank you for coming, Rob. We have always been a civic-minded company. We've supported many civic projects, including fireworks displays, library projects. We support the Autistic ACAP Foundation here. We founded the Johnson Creek Corridor Committee, or we're a founder, which is now the Johnson Creek Watershed Council, and it is in one of our buildings, free of rent. I have personally contracted every employer with at least 15 employees, both on the west and the east side of McLaughlin in the NMI district. And all of them are in support of our project, all of the people. Our engineers have determined that our current building might not survive another flood. I forgot I also said, we also contacted most of the downtown businesses and Dark Horse Comics, which have, Neil and Mike have agreed that support our project. At our first planning staff meeting with Denny Yeager and his staff, they proposed making this large investment with this residential over our store. We intend to make that a LEED facility, and if we can qualify, we want to make it have the affordable housing component that's allowed in Clackamas County. We also, my wife and I, have the largest solar farm in Clackamas County that's presently being reviewed, 75 acres of solars energy. So we believe we're good citizens. And we've been here, we're the largest, we've been employing, and over the life had millions of people come and work for us. I ask that you go ahead and adopt this overlay and allow us to continue to exist in Milwaukie. Thank you. My wife, president of the women's owned, this business is a women's owned, and the granddaughter of the founder, Roy Bishop, has a video presentation as she has to fulfill her commitment to our employees and customers in a fabric buying trip to New York. So that's why she isn't here. I don't know how to proceed with the video of there she is. God, she's beautiful.
Volume?
Volume?
Is there sound hooked up to this?
It'll be more effective with the sound.
As
Yeah, I'm
beautiful
not
as she is, I don't think.
I'm not a lip reader, unfortunately. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. How long is the video?
A minute and a half. I just don't know how to rewind it now. You know how to. Oh, perfect.
Can you turn up the sound at all?
Can you turn up the volume manually and then put the mic next to the speaker on the computer?
Should actually work.
We got sound and we got your sound in there. It could have been a little louder, but it was overall pretty good.
And we are over.
There we go.
And now we just need to figure out how to go back to the beginning of that slide. There you go.
Store, Oregon Worsted has been here for over.
Even if I do page up and then page down. Or I've got the video separately, so we just do that.
The sound was working.
Yeah, it was just a matter of rewinding it.
Good years. I like to think that we have been good shepherds. Good evening. My name is Nancy Bishop.
Oh, now we got her twice.
Oregon Worsted Company Mill Store at 9701 Southeast.
It's running on two separate tracks.
We can get that one up. No, that is.
Good evening. My name is Nancy Bishop Dietrich with the Oregon Worsted Company Mill Store at 9701 Southeast McLaughlin Boulevard. Unfortunately, I had a business trip planned for New York and I cannot be here tonight. But I am here tonight seeking the City Council's support on the
Echo.
This is the first time I've had that happen. Good evening. My name is Nancy Bishop Dietrich with the Oregon Worsted Company Mill Store.
It's a function of the display when it's in the presentation mode.
Unfortunately, I had a business
There we go.
There we go. For New York, and I cannot be here. But I am here tonight seeking the City Council's support on the Planning Commission's recommendation for an overlay on our property. This overlay will allow us to continue and replace the building should another flood happen. This operation has over 100 employees, and I would hate to see those jobs go away should we not get this overlay. I understand there's a 10-year sunset on the overlay, and we are okay with that. On a personal note, the Mill Store, Oregon Worsted, has been here for over 100 years. I like to think that we have been good shepherds of the community, and we've helped generations of Milwaukeean sewers. Thank you for the opportunity that you've given us, and I hope that we can be here for another 100 years. But I do need your support. Please vote yes on the Planning Commission's recommendation for the overlay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I actually had a question or two for Mr. Dietrich.
Mr. Dietrich, if you could come back up.
Thank you. You mentioned that that part of the project would include affordable housing component, and I was wondering if you had any further detail on how much affordable housing would be included.
The Clackamas County has a program which we have to comply with for affordable housing, and the details of that plan are complicated and will be, but I didn't spend $150,000 yet to have the facility designed to go to them, because they have an input after you get something to show them. My understanding is we're different than most owners. We own other real property, and all of our real properties we own and we hold forever. We believe that some of our employees would qualify, and that would be great if they lived right there.
Okay.
And we think that, and we've had other employees who live down the street in affordable housing, which was done by other governmental agencies over the period, and we still do.
Thank you. Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
If you were to take advantage of an overlay, if we allowed an overlay, what would happen during the transition, during construction? Where would the mill-end store go?
We have 2 or 3 different options that realtors have identified on a short-term basis that we could move to.
And those options include buildings that you currently own, or
no, buildings that are for lease on McLaughlin Corridor.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And would one of those include, you mentioned your wife's family's great history in Pendleton, would one of those options include the location that is adjacent to the Pendleton wool store?
That's in discussion.
Okay. And maybe some of your other properties that you own here in Milwaukie?
Well, not any other buildings that we own in Milwaukie. John Bishop with Pendleton is supportive, and I don't know if she sent you a letter yet or not, but he was in supportive of the plan that's here before us today.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else?
I did have one. Your wife said in that video, and you had said in one of the Planning Commission hearings, that you were okay with the 10 years. What if, and you do sound like you're looking at, true development options. What if it were 5 years?
I have to look and see. I don't know what the processes are in this procedure with our architects and planners. We just started when the Planning Commission suggested it, when we went and met with Denny. And so we moved forward and have done it to this point. I don't know if we could complete a building by that amount of time, but I know that we can certainly get moving on it to file for necessary permits.
Okay.
I have in Beaverton, I'm building a new Holiday Inn Express. And in that procedure, we're probably 2 years out before we can dig dirt and in that facility. In Jansen Beach, it takes us a year to do a partition of a piece in City of Portland. So things are all seem to vary in different schedules. But I don't have enough time. I'd prefer getting things done because I don't want to, I'm getting older.
We are all, yeah.
I have to do this while I'm still alive,
I guess I do have one question. You're not suggesting that you would build unless there was a flood, right? You're not saying that if there were an overlay granted and it was a 5-year that you would tear that building down and start building a new one, would you?
We'll have to do that, I think. I'll tell you, it was interesting. I'd never thought about that, how to do it, until I was in the Planning Commission. And one of the commissioners suggested to me, and I didn't know, well, Howard, are you going to wait till there's a flood and be out of business for a while until you did it? And that put a light on my head, and I said, maybe we better move forward faster than not, because I'm getting older. And, so I don't want to leave that problem for my kids to solve. I mean, I don't know if any of you understand that when you have kids involved in something, you want to take care of all their problems before they get older. And that's our responsibility. And so that's what we do. And we have the ability to do that sort of thing. God's blessed us a lot. And that is, we have to all understand that God is the one who makes these decisions for all of us and helps us. Anyway.
Any other questions?
No, not for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks very much, Hart. All right, Janet Labar.
That definitely was a cooler jacket than the one that I've got on. Good evening, Mayor Gamba and Milwaukee City Councilors. My name is Janet Labar. My address is 111 Southwest Columbia Street in Portland. I'm here tonight on behalf of Greater Portland, Inc., and we are partners with the State of Milwaukee. We are the region's economic development organization, so it is really our intent and our purpose as an organization on economic development to attract new investment into the Greater Portland metro area. On the flip side of that, so we are working with companies to try and recruit them in, create new jobs and new investment into the metro area. On the flip side of that, we have launched a regional economic development strategy called Greater Portland 2020. And if you look at GPI in terms of we are marketing the region as a product that we're trying to sell, then Greater Portland 2020 is really our product improvement line, if you will, where we're talking about a plan that addresses and hopes to achieve economic prosperity for all, focused on three things: people, business, and place. So recently, on the place side of that, we've looked at the shortage of industrial sites across the region, and from a pure greenfield perspective, there are maybe down to 3 sites north of 50-plus acres in the entire region for companies to actually consider building upon or for development to occur. So I'm here tonight because I want to emphasize the importance of industrial sites to the region. It is critical to what GPI does on a regular basis to try and attract investment into the region, and we see the NMIA as an anchor, certainly not only in the city of Milwaukee, but in the broader region as well. And just for context, we have a pipeline of about 40 to 50 active projects. So these are companies who are considering making an investment decision, and they have shortlisted the Portland metro area. 2/3 of those companies are manufacturing projects, and this is everything from light manufacturing to advanced manufacturing projects. And the balance of that pipeline falls into the industries of athletic and outdoor apparel, clean technology, software, and even some food processing and food manufacturing. Let's see. The other point I wanted to cover is that we have a project that we will cite and announce, hopefully, in East County. That is $100 million of capital investment, roughly on 7.5 acres, 100,000 square foot building. It is going on a greenfield property. However, the point that I'm trying to make there is that it is a terrific project and an opportunity that Milwaukee very well could have seen if we were able to submit a site on that project. Mayor Gamba, you mentioned innovation, maybe switching out the I in NMIA to innovation in your State of the City remarks, and I think that that is a fantastic vision for NMIA. I think it's important for the council to build upon the great work that your staff has already done by setting a vision for this area, and we are happy to promote that and market that to companies, again, who would be considering making an investment in the region and have that vision of makers, doers, innovators, entrepreneurs, both from a startup capacity all the way to a much more established business and operation here in the region, something for us to market and promote. So I think I'll probably close with that, but I am here to support the NMIA plan as it was adopted by council last July, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
I don't have it.
So the sort of balance that we're trying to find up here is that we know we need more housing. We also know that we need jobs, right? And all of us, I think, have experienced issues where neighbors to industrial sites have had issues, whether it's air quality issues or noise issues. And so what we're struggling with as we think about this is if we start allowing more housing in areas that are right now meant for manufacturing, meant for industrial, meant for jobs, because of the sort of area that now pushes against, because of sound, because of air quality, because of things like that, it feels, or we worry, that it could start eroding the ability to use areas near it as industrial sites. And I guess what I'm personally struggling with is trying to imagine the industry of the future, right? I'm not seeing smokestacks and 3D printing, things like that, and maybe that's not as big a problem for industrial. So from the standpoint of your organization, which is looking at what the future of industry is, do you share that concern? Do you share the concern that if we start allowing more residential into our industrial area, that we will, in the end, lose a lot more industrial area? Or will the new kinds of industrial work that happens be completely compatible with residential?
I would like to believe that the latter part of that is true. That so far is not manifesting itself in our pipeline of what we're seeing in terms of actual projects. Doesn't mean that manufacturing that we are seeing today is dirty. I mean, that's a myth, and that is a perception that I think a lot of people still carry over from the smokestack era and some of those heavier cities, maybe towards the Midwest and the East Coast. However, my organization, again, is responsible, and we do this in partnership with the cities and the counties, port districts, higher education, as well as the private sector. Our focus is on recruiting new investment companies to the area. So we have to have product to sell. And I'm not a housing expert. We are, in fact, challenged now by the fact that there is a shortage of housing, affordable housing and attainable housing throughout the region. And that is also becoming an issue in our ability to attract companies because they need places for their employees to live as well. So, I'm going to stay in our area of knowing that we're supposed to focus on recruitment of new companies. They need a place to land, so we need product to sell. However, because we are focused on Greater Portland 2020 and economic prosperity for all, we are willing to be a convener to some of these regional challenges, and you know this from the Small Cities Consortium meetings that we do every month with our smaller communities across the region, that these are real challenges that we have to address together. So, my commitment to doing that is by convening that special intersection of a region, public and private partners working to develop solutions that talk about traffic congestion, housing affordability and attainability, industrial land, adaptive reuse and redevelopment, all of these things that will help us, again, be more competitive as a region and, again, bring more investment into our communities. I know I probably didn't answer the question. I got to stay in my wheelhouse, Mayor.
Doesn't look like there's an easy answer to it.
All right. Anybody else? Nothing?
Thank you. Thanks.
Janet.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Thanks.
Brian Guinea? Did I pronounce that right, Brian?
You did, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. My name is Brian Guinea. I'm with Business Oregon, the state's economic development agency. My address is 4609 Southwest Water Avenue in Portland. Business Oregon has an awesome relationship working with the city on infrastructure projects and then with you through your local businesses on financing, exporting, export promotion, expansion, recruitment projects as well. But I'm here tonight to talk about the state's support for the preservation of industrial land, especially in communities landlocked as yourself without the ability to expand an urban growth boundary or to annex more land in. Industrial lands are critical in preserving and promoting a community's economic resiliency. Industrial lands are kind of the base for medium and high wage jobs, for a community to be able to retain their traded sector anchor tenant businesses, and actually prevents displacement, gentrification, facilitates transfer of intergenerational wealth through the jobs it creates, being able to pass business and home ownership, keep it within families, between businesses. So preserving industrial land is a long-term play. We have a responsibility to community members and constituents today, but we also have a responsibility to those members that are not even born yet. They're out 20 and 30 years. And once industrial land is rezoned for commercial residential, it's almost never redesignated back to industrial in the state. In Oregon, of the 140 similar sized communities that were surveyed, the average breakout of industrial land is about 16%. Some communities having much higher of that. But generally, once you get below 15%, that's kind of a tipping point where a community would transition to a bedroom community and kind of lose some of those anchor tenant jobs and just be a feeder for other areas that have traded sector jobs. And another look, if a business approach was taken with the situation, one might estimate the taxable value of the decision to keep industrial lands or allow housing, and then compare that with the cost of providing the services to those areas under both scenarios. I'll just reference the PGE employment lands analysis that was brought up already. Once industrial land is gone, it's gone. Of the tier 1 sites that are still available in the metro area, it's about 7 months to get those greenfield sites into production. Everything else, you're looking at 7 to 30 months, 22 to 40 months, and about $20 million per site to get those lands and those areas able to produce those traded sector jobs. And I guess just in closing, we've talked about tonight the mix of putting residential housing right adjacent to industrial areas, and there's a useful example recently with the city of Canby in their Pioneer Park industrial area and a residential development that went on the west side. And prior to the actual occupation of the units by tenants, there was agreement from the city, from the developers, from all of the property owners in the industrial park, hey, this is a great idea, workforce housing, it's right here. But the perspective of the new tenants wasn't taken in. And so as soon as the units became occupied adjacent to this industrial area, now all of a sudden the city, the businesses, everyone was receiving complaints of tractor trailers moving at all hours of the night, machinery running on the weekends. And all of a sudden now everybody, the city, the business owners, utility providers, even the railroad is kind of sharing this problem that's very hard to extract themselves from. So again, we support preservation of industrial land. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right, Ed, you're up.
I'm to the point of staggering. Ed Zumwalt, 10888 Southeast 29th, Milwaukee. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the time. I'll battle through this. I'm going to make it quick. I'm throwing away what I was going to say, and I was going to talk about the history of it, of that building, and all that means to the city, 100 years, etc. And I don't feel you can build a city by wrecking its history. And you want to build a city, so I thought you should keep the history. But I'm going to change tack. When 9/11 happened, somehow the neighborhood associations got together and decided to put on, the city decided to put on a benefit. And the neighborhood groups got together, the leadership, and everyone started looking to me, and all I'd done is put on about 24 concerts down at the library. We want to put on a benefit. What do I know about putting on a benefit? So I look around. By then, it was 10/11. We had a month because I wanted to do it by Memorial Day. By Veterans Day, 11/11. And it was winter, and there's no place to put it on, so I called Mr. Dietrich. I said, could I use your parking lot down at the theater? There was a long pause, and he said, what's wrong with the theater? And I said, I hate to remind you, but it's been shut down for 2 or 3 years. And I don't know whether you know it, but when you shut down a building like that and let it sit for 2 or 3 years, it's like a gut fire. It's just at the mercy of the elements. He said, well, can you have a fire inspector and a building inspector down here tomorrow? And I said, I don't know. So we worked that out. I got them down there, and they went through that theater, and they were appalled. Oh, God. So they made a list, and that was the first list. This is what you have to do to open that theater. And they gave it to him. And he started getting tears in his eyes. No, he didn't, but it was horrible, the cost. Every day, fire inspector, building inspector, here's the list. And it kept growing. He got it so we could open it for that benefit. That poor old theater, it was the old Southgate. Do any of you remember it? And so everyone in there had to have a cell phone because of the communications. They were scared to death. There were more firemen around there. And we made it work. We got the guy that owned High Rocks Pub to cater it, food, beer. He gave me all the money from that. And we raised quite a bit of money just because I can describe this best. Tom McCall, one time down in Lane County, they wanted to put up some statues for him or something like that. And Tom McCall had an ego, to say the least, but he said, look, heroes are not big giants outlined against a red sky. They're the average guy that looks around and said, this is my home, and it's my job to make it better. That's what they do. Every show I put on in this city, after that, festival days, etc., I could call Howard, and he was one of the contributors, not only in time, but money. And it takes that in the community. And so I switched from history to community, because I want you to know what we're working with. Part of the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay, thanks, Ed. Denise.
I'm going to come up with Kelly on behalf of the Downtown Business Association. She's lost her voice. So.
Okay, you're translating tonight? So give him 6 minutes.
I'll let her say hello, and if there's anything you want to say. Denise Emmerling Baker and Jackie Chan. We live in the historic Downtown Neighborhood Association, and I have a small consulting business from my home. And I am part of the Downtown Business Association.
Kelly Keener, Downtown Milwaukie Business Association, and apologies, but maybe a grace tonight. You won't get to hear much from me.
Well, while Kelly is still able to speak at all, I'll mention that this has come up at our Downtown Business Association meetings, and I have personally spoken to many of the business representatives who come to the meetings and have heard great support for this, and I have not heard anybody against it. Does that mean we've spoken to everybody? No. And you may be receiving more emails from some people because we know that that is something that you like. Anything else on the business association side? I want to just, without repeating anything, I want to thank you, Mayor Gamba and council members, for allowing this conversation and for your state of the city, because what is important about Milwaukee is that we have the delightfully livable city that we are. We are getting the pipeline in for development, and on those two notes, keeping somebody who wants to be here. Mill End store, I have out-of-state friends visit and they say, I want to go to Mill End and then to Pendleton. It is creating jobs, A, because they have those locations, and B, because when the people are coming, my friends, the people who come in tour buses, they're going to other small businesses in Milwaukee and fulfilling the jobs for those restaurants, coffee shops, and other locations so that they don't have to shut down. And we know how hard it is for the downtown little businesses to stay open, and it's going to be scary with all the construction coming, and we appreciate that you're going to help with that. But having a developer, a man like Dietrich, say, I want to keep this icon here. I want my family to generationally keep it, as was mentioned by the development person that just spoke. It's important to keep it in the family. And was also mentioned by the woman before him, place matters. Mill End is part of Milwaukee. Mill End matters. And it matters not even that it's in an industrial area, it's on a floodplain. This man has done his research. He's spent thousands of dollars to find out what can we do when it floods again, and he's willing to invest more. We have an investor on the pipeline already. We don't want to kick Mill End out and get somebody new in who's looking at Oregon. We have him. He's ready to spend the money. And I spoke with Deidre Colantino, who's the property manager for Waverly Greens Apartments, and they are very near. She said, I have no issue with another building going in. We have a wait list of people coming in. If you look at any of the rental rates in Portland, we're still in the top 10 in the nation for low vacancy rates. It's not going to affect our other developments. It's right between Selwood and Portland, which is a very desirable spot. Their land is large enough that the fear of other industry interrupting the residents there, I don't think it's very viable. But what is viable is climate change and Johnson Creek flooding again. And that is information that has to be readily shared to anybody who wants to build on that property. We have a man willing to put a beautiful shop in that helps bring more business to Milwaukee. It is, you saw the design, it's beautiful. I mean, I know that I will bring more people there, and they'll want to go to other businesses, thereby meeting your goal of creating jobs while keeping the history of Milwaukee and the people who care about it here. I just can't see any reason not to allow this overlay, and the Planning Commission has recommended it as well. And I know there might be other builders or specialists in construction who say, oh, there's another way to do this, or maybe offices will work. But these people have spent thousands of dollars trying to figure out how do we rebuild. And they have come up with a good solution that I think is very good for Milwaukee.
Agreed.
So, any other?
Thank you.
Thanks.
I guess I do have one question.
Okay.
Your friends, when they come, do they come because they want to go to that specific store in that specific floodplain, or because they want to go to a Mill End fabric store?
They want to go to this giant one.
That's the
giant one.
Or a giant one elsewhere.
They would go to
across the
Pendleton. There's other Pendletons, but because they're here for the giant Mill End, I take them to the Pendleton that's near us, and because we have little shops on Main Street, then we start to go there as well. But
Nothing about that building or that specific site, though, that your friends say.
Well,
I need to
everybody
go to this
just knows
building
about it being there, and that it's
that's
huge.
Itself. Okay.
And that the carpet store had the Portland Airport carpet in it, and that they can get the wide selection of fabrics, whether it's upholstery or crafts and sewing supplies that you just can't get anywhere else. It's got a name. It draws people in.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So that is all the cards I have. I was hoping we would get to hear from Mr. Bruce, because he is he's the guy that does the flex space, and so to me that's one of the innovative things that's happening. So I was hoping we'd hear from him.
Yes, thank you. Still see some sitting out there.
Somewhat.
Mine, the cards.
Oh, you're supposed to bring them in here. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, no, they need to come in and be given to Ann, and she passes them around. All right, so.
That explains why there are so many people still here.
Well, we're all over the place now.
Yeah,
anyway, so.
Yeah, we didn't.
really.
All right, Mr. Bruce.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councilors. My name is Jimmy Bruce, and I started Northwest Flex Space in Milwaukie to offer a more innovative and business-friendly leasing option to industrial users. And we currently have 2 locations in the NMI, or in the proposed NMIA zone, and one is directly across the street from the Millport overlay. I am
Across McLaughlin from it?
across Millport.
Across
We're on Millport. Yeah.
Okay.
The other one is directly across McLaughlin from there as well. So. I am in support of the proposed zoning changes in the Millport overlay. I think they allow for more opportunities and subsequently jobs and continued economic development in the area. I think Vera and Amy, they did a great job kind of summarizing a lot of the concerns I think that that business owners have in the area. I definitely have a concern about pushing more businesses out and long-standing businesses out of that area. But overall, I think that I support the changes.
You support the overlay and allowing residential?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So I have some questions.
Yes, please.
So I know that one of the businesses, and I don't know if they're still there, was the bee hive people,
Yep.
Bee Thinking?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're doing a fair amount of woodwork, relatively loud. So it's a summer day. Your bay doors are all open.
Yeah.
They're doing their thing. The windows are open on the residential, and a baby's sleeping. Got a mom in there that's dead tired because she's got a baby.
Yeah.
They light up the saws. This is what we have to picture, right?
Yeah.
We have to picture what sort of the worst case scenario could look like and try and figure out how we fix it before it happens.
Yeah.
So, we're going to get that phone call about the saws. So what, and then, so how would,
odors or,
Yeah,
I don't know what all your tenants are using, but.
I don't have experience with residential, but I think, certainly just the being adjacent to McLaughlin, I think there's inherently a lot of noise there. I wasn't completely clear on what the agreement was, where all the proposed residents would be signing some agreement. And I assume it's basically to acknowledge the fact that they're going to accept a certain amount of disturbances. But that's what's inherent in that zone. And I would say there's definitely an expectation that there is going to be noise. It's definitely a part of it. I'd say it's definitely a challenge of allowing that residential. But given the sort of, at least the design that I saw up there, it did seem that there's at least the shape of it did kind of block at least our side of Millport from seemingly the majority of the proposed residences, including kind of that like common area that I think is really popular and a great part of that kind of a project. I don't know if that answers your question.
To some degree.
the truth is that we even struggle with that within the zone that we have, where, just trying to balance that out. We have an expectation of trying to minimize, air quality, and certainly sound. We consider part of that.
Amy, could you put up a map that shows where his property is vis-a-vis the...
Some of your uses are just straight up office, aren't there? Some of the businesses in there that are more office-y with
really
warehouse components?
Mostly just really just accessory to some warehouse use, but I definitely believe that there's. I think when you're in that area, if you look around, it's a bunch of industrial areas. I think people can make that judgment call and understand, like, if they're extremely sensitive to noise, that it's maybe not the best place to be.
Are your tenants all just daytime operations? Nobody's doing nighttime work?
No, we have operations that are 24 hours, so it's pretty much.
Because we do have a noise ordinance that would limit that at 7 or 8 or something at night.
If the noise is escaping the building.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there may be exceptions for for purely industrial, but once there's residential in there, we'd be, getting those complaints for sure.
Yeah, it seems like that the buildings seem to envelop that pretty well. I'd say a lot of the trucks are probably, are outside loading and forklifts operation and stuff. That kind of thing is probably more of the sound concern or noise concern than the actual manufacturing processes or things that are happening inside the envelope of the building.
So your property is across Millport and on the
west side.
East side of the creek? West side of McLaughlin, east of the creek?
Yeah.
Between McLaughlin and the creek, okay.
Right.
So just so that people can see. So you're...
West of the creek.
West of the creek?
Yeah.
Oh, so he's not
west of the
directly
creek.
adjacent.
It's like kitty corner.
Right in this area.
No.
So if this is McLaughlin here,
No, you're way off.
It's right here. Yeah. Mill end's there. And this is the building here where I'm at.
Yeah.
This thing is right there.
Okay.
Category.
Okay.
This is what?
OLCC? Yeah.
This is the PAC, or Americold, yeah. This is Americold, and OLCC is here, but OLCC is here as well next door.
There's an office space between the creek and where they're at, too. Yeah, right there.
That's pure office.
The Watershed Council's there. The Watershed Council is
they're
there.
further out.
No, that's the Watershed Council.
Right there.
Right there?
Yeah.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then AMR used to be just west of it, but they're going.
Yeah, I would think that McLaughlin would pose more of a sound issue for the residential, at least in that, well, specifically to the Mill End area. The spaces in that Millport overlay that are further west may be a little more susceptible to that issue.
So, based on your experience, and I realize it's only been, 4 or 5 years you've been there?
Yeah.
But you seem to rent out the second you open up a space. So, Johnson economics rang a little untrue to me. I think, I'm wondering if you had the availability of a taller building of more floors, could you rent out, how much more space could you rent out based on the market that's out there for your kind of flexible space?
I think that consistently the availability of truck access and dock access is very important. So second story industrial is definitely more challenging, but by the zoning being more open, I think that there's a lot of sort of ancillary businesses that could utilize space like that. I don't know if that answers.
All right. Anybody else? Any other questions?
I have none.
Thank you very
Actually,
much.
are you an owner of the buildings you're in, or you lease?
No.
You just have a lease for them?
Master lease.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
All right, Daniel Newberry.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Newberry. I'm the Executive Director of Johnson Creek Watershed Council, and our address is 1900 Southeast Millport. And if it's okay, I'd like to talk about something a little different. And I apologize if I have missed some things in the, I guess, 218-page document that you had with all the
Longer than
code changes. Okay, maybe a little longer.
25 pages.
Okay, anyway, the one I saw. But I was a stakeholder representative at the NMIA process, and we talked a lot about Johnson Creek as it relates to the future of this whole area. And there was various discussions about, using as a recreation corridor, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to make sure that the issues that we talked about get translated into code changes. And in particular, there's several things that I'm concerned about. One is building setbacks along Johnson Creek and making sure that they are adequate to provide a width of large form trees, that they will be able to provide shade along Johnson Creek. High stream temperature is a major issue throughout this whole region, and as climate continues to change, it's only going to get worse. And we have an opportunity now to provide, enough space to have a riparian corridor that provides enough tree shade. And
what is that distance?
The easy answer is it depends.
Can I give you a specific location where we're talking about?
I don't think I could just off the cuff give you an answer to that, but I would be happy to talk with some folks on your planning staff and talk about some other cities and what they've done. I also wear another hat. I'm a member of Portland's Urban Forestry Commission, and so we're looking at various plans for redevelopment within the city of Portland. And if I could just slightly change the subject, one of the big issues we're looking at with redevelopment has to do with maintaining enough green space, especially in commercial and industrial zones, so that you can do something to offset the heat island effect, because those two particular land uses, because they have so much impervious area, it's especially important that when you're redeveloping that you have some kind of formula for preserving some kind of landscaped space, especially space that's big enough for trees. I liked in the NMIA plan that came out that they talked about planting strips, especially along roads. And it's important to consider to make sure that you have planting strips wide enough to allow large form trees. And most of them that I saw in the plan did, but there were some places where it said 3.5 feet, which really is not big enough for a large form tree. But anyway, I want to make sure those issues of both riparian buffers and adequate space for green space in newly developed industrial areas get translated into code. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I ask
Yes,
a question?
sure.
I noticed looking around the area along your parking lot from where your office is, there's a place where you've revegetated. You have like a sample project and you've got a something there. It's fairly narrow. Was there any effort to do any depave to be able to put bigger trees in there?
No, I mean, we were working within the existing footprint. I mean, that in particular is as you note, is clearly not wide enough, over the long term. And, you'd want a buffer to be more than a planting strip, right? So it's more than just one tree wide. I mean, we
Well, I was just saying,
we
under
can
our
talk
code,
we can
it's
talk
50
about that
feet, I
offline, but yeah.
Water quality resources, but so you've got a huge parking lot there, and I don't assume you have that many employees at the Watershed Council that you use that whole parking lot. And there's a group called Depave that takes away pavement and restores it. There's been no discussion of doing any of that.
I think you would have to talk to our landlord about that. I mean, we work with, we do a lot of work around the entire Johnson Creek watershed with planting trees, but we typically just look at the space that's available for planting trees. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that Kelly's?
Oh, I think that is Kelly Keener.
Kelly, do you have like really cool handwriting?
Big swoopy case. Okay.
She studied
I already did
to
that
be a
one.
doctor.
Brandon Kempton.
Brandon Kempton, 2405 Southeast Morris Street. Basically, the Mill-End store has been a big impact on our shop. We have the last repair shop in Milwaukie. We've been in business 25 years. They are 30% of our business. The Dietrich family has been real good to us. If something's to happen and they go down, we lose probably 30% of our business.
And your business is what?
Kempton's vehicle maintenance.
Oh, vehicle. Okay.
That's basically all I got to say.
We're in a hole in the wall in the Anderson property.
Yeah, you guys think it's all Anderson. It's not. We have a corner of it.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So that is now all the cards I have. There are no more out there on the table or anything. Anybody else want to speak? I was actually hoping we would hear from Mr. Anderson because I had a question for him. Was he planning to come or
I have not
any
seen
representative?
him tonight, no.
No? Okay.
I talked to him yesterday. Both, I knew not old man, but number one son and not grandson. But I talked to both of them, and they have another matter today with some people from out of town.
Could you encourage them to come to the next hearing?
I just want to make sure we have this for the record. So what he indicated was that he had talked to the son and grandson, and that they had another engagement out of town, so they were not able to participate this evening.
All right. So.
And that the mayor has asked that we reach out as staff to him, and we will do so. Yep.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. All right, so that is all the testimony. How are you guys feeling? Do you want to get into the rebuttal from the staff or do you want to do that at the next hearing?
I would maybe ask staff if they feel that they're prepared.
Well, the reason I'm looking at you is because you have a 10 a.m. date with a babysitter.
A 10 p.m.
A 10 p.m. date with a babysitter.
She's not staying overnight until 10 a.m.
That's what I meant. I don't know how long they might take. So that's
staff.
All right.
Staff on rebuttal. How much time?
Does staff have any response to the testimony? So come on up.
I would think an important thing, too, would be, is there any direction that they're going to have to look
We do not
up between?
Have any rebuttal?
No rebuttal.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask you one question?
I like that.
May not have rebuttal, but...
Well, that's the next thing. So does any member of council have any questions regarding the testimony to this point?
Go ahead.
Yeah, there was testimony earlier that if there was a rebuild, it had to be a foot off the ground. Is that, I think, what I understood? Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
Because of the floodplain?
Is Chuck still here? I'm going to let Chuck answer
Is he here?
that.
Oh, yes.
We knew
Our
we'd get you up
floodplain
here.
manager will be able to answer your question. Yes.
Councilor Abma, I'm sorry. Can you please? I was listening to two different conversations.
I thought there was testimony, I forget whom it was, but that said that if there was a rebuild, if there was a flood and it had to be rebuilt, if it was destroyed in some way, that it had to be a foot, at least a foot off the ground. But maybe I misunderstood that.
It's the FEMA requirements for non-residential in Zone A's is that it either be flood-proofed or reconstructed a foot above the floodplain, base flood elevation, if the damage is more than 50% of the market value of the building. Otherwise, there is no requirement.
Okay.
So it's based on market value of the building.
Not a foot above the parking lot level, a foot above
the floodplain.
100-year floodplain level,
Right.
which
Foot
in that
above the
area
flood.
is...
That is actually backwater from the Willamette River.
Right,
so
I know that, but height on the building wall, for example? Guess.
I don't have
Wild
a guess.
stab.
Somebody said 7 to 10 feet.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know what it is down by where the new bridge in the park, but
Okay.
I don't know up there.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions for staff at this point?
I wanted to say something.
Okay.
So the way we've structured this, or asked for it to be structured, is we wanted to get the input tonight on the mill-in store and the overlay and the plan, and then perhaps have a more detailed discussion about some of the code-related issues at the next meeting. And I say that just in terms of the structure of the hearing. So I think what we would propose is that we just basically restart the hearing again at the next meeting.
Right.
So that we're
Are
not,
you looking for some kind of decision from us tonight as to a direction, or no?
You don't need to, unless you wanted to provide some assurance about what direction you wanted us. If you needed more input from us, you could give us that direction tonight. But I guess the rebuttal piece is kind of what was throwing me off here. Is there was. I would expect that we would make a much shorter but focused staff presentation next time, and then there would probably be some additional testimony. You've asked for some additional testimony next time, so we're continuing the hearing and having some additional input.
Yeah, I think the rebuttal, I think that we have a script kind of problem.
We have script errors tonight.
We have script errors
Yes.
tonight, so
That's all
it's not really rebuttal in a legislative.
So I was thinking we're pressing pause. We're basically pressing pause on the hearing and restarting again.
Mayor Gamba, this is obviously going to be a multi-meeting task just because of the size of the task. You've asked for the communications from Metro that were received by one of the applicant's representatives, as well as some communications from the Andersons if they choose to participate. Is there any other communications or any other stakeholders that it would aid the council with this portion of the discussion to hear from or to get information from?
Well, I mean, so as I explained earlier, what we're up here wrestling with is this clash of uses, right? This potential clash of uses in the future. And so right now, mostly what we've heard is that from people that think the overlay is a good idea. I'd want to hear from industrial users, manufacturers in the area who for whom that might be a problem, just so that we have both sides of the story as we're considering this. What I fear is that we go, well, nobody cares that we let this industrial area go except, Greater Portland Inc. and Oregon Business. So we do it, and then 6 months later, Precision Castparts or somebody who else, is manufacturing in that area loses their minds because all of a sudden, you know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that they're all very aware that this is on the table. They're very aware of what it could mean, of how that plays out. They're not just not thinking about it because they're busy with their business. And that's what I would like. I don't know about the rest of you, but I would like to hear from industrial users who may or may not be affected by this as to their thoughts. So, whatever degree.
I think that would be okay. I also was wondering why we weren't seeing a little bit more of the maybe in the packet, and maybe we can request some more information from staff. But I know that there were at least 90 people who showed up at the open houses, and there were how many, 100 or more, who responded to the online surveys. And I haven't seen the survey information. I've just sort of seen a summary from staff in the staff reports that the majority of people who participated in the NMIA process, it's not just the stakeholders, it wasn't just the technical advisory group. There were, I'm counting hundreds of people who provided input, and that the majority was against residential in the NME. And so I'm not seeing that. We're not getting that testimony here, and we didn't get it at Planning Commission because I watched all of those.
Yeah.
But I know that information is there and it was captured somewhere.
I do have it, and we can provide that to council for the next meeting.
And I'd sort of along both of those lines, I'd like to see, Amy read us some stuff in her testimony, but I'd like to actually see the articles she's citing too. I think those would be helpful to have in the packet. And then we're told it's Americold that's really the business that's probably directly across. And it'd be useful to get some, their testimony if they'd like to come testify, but even short of that, to get some assessment by staff, I guess, of their usage patterns and usage hours and how much nighttime usage there is there, truck traffic there is there. Yeah.
We can do that as well.
Okay.
Well, you talk about truck traffic and when things happen, and that causes me to be curious also about when trucks are coming and going from Mill End and, the other stores around there, the other
businesses.
Yeah, the other businesses around there, that would be a factor that I think we need to know if we're going to find out the others.
I am not sure if that was collected, but I can talk to staff, and we'll see what we can get you.
Okay. Anything else?
No, let me look at my notes. Oh, well, so another issue for me that really didn't factor into, I didn't hear it testified about at Planning Commission, but I guess it's a worry I have is creating more places for housing that competes with downtown and central Milwaukee, which are our designated places for greater housing density. So I'd like some thoughts from staff on that.
Around demand.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
around
do that.
demand and diluting the demand. Yeah.
That's a really interesting thought. I hadn't thought about that before, Council President Beatty, but that's a really good thought, because we also, I recall when we were talking about retail businesses in other areas, and we wanted to be sure we, protected the retail businesses in the central core, downtown core at that time. And so I think that's good that we need to know on the other side of that, the housing issues also. We need to know how that affects the whole community. It's kind of like dominoes. If there's more of this or less of that or whatever, or if there's competition. Competition's good sometimes. I'm not saying it's not, but.
I was even concerned when we did Central Milwaukee that we were diluting the future of downtown to some degree.
You were worried about retail there, not housing.
I was mostly worried about retail at that juncture. But
if we need to know the issues on one, retail, then we should know the issues on the other, housing also.
Sure.
A city is planned to have different things in different areas, and when you start cross-pollinating them, you need to know how the dominoes are going to fall.
And it was in your slide, in one of Amy's opening slides, but it'd be nice to have, and one of the, I think the Business Oregon guy testified to that. It would be useful to have a little bit, just a paragraph or two with those statistics about cities our size, how many have what percentage of industrial versus residential. I think that
we can do that as well.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
So just as a reminder, based on this information, we're 2 weeks out from having that next conversation. We will be getting a staff report ready in 10 days out, which is actually 4 days from now. So I'm just making sure that you guys know we may have some stuff coming in a little bit later, but we'll try and get this out as soon as possible. We will be publishing the ordinance 1 week out. just so that you're able to, if you want to adopt ordinance, because we have to publish that a full week in advance. But some of this data won't be made available till the Friday before.
So I can't remember if it was in there, but the question on the setbacks, I assume it's a 50-foot like everywhere else. It's WQR?
Yes.
Okay.
And at what point would we address, if we're going to consider an overlay, at what point do we address the timing, whether it be a 10-year or a 5-year or a 7-year or whatever?
In our discussion.
Yeah, you can do that in your discussion and in your vote.
Right.
And any other code
Yep.
suggestions we might have.
Yep. Okay. And we'll just, the way it works is we'll do it as amended. So you'll read in what the amendments are, and then we'll read the title.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, I would entertain a motion to continue the hearing.
Move to continue the hearing
Second?
To a date certain.
to a date certain of
February 20th.
February 20th.
Is that right? Yeah.
Is there a second? Okay.
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded to continue the hearing on the North Milwaukie Industrial Area Plan and Code Amendments file number CPA-2017-002 and ZA-2017-003 to a date certain of February 20th, 2018. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None heard. It passes unanimously. We are continued until February 20th. Thank you.
Thank you for all coming.
Thanks. Good discussions.
Thank
you, Ed.
Council reports.
We do not have a script. He is in Hawaii having a lovely time, and we missed it, so I am sorry. He wants a script. We were a little focused on the state of the city.
Oh, yeah.
And Jason's out of town, so we don't have one.
I gave the one upcoming one that was critical, which was the tour of the
High school.
high school.
Well, in the library
Library open house.
February 22nd. February 22nd. Go ahead.
Well, let's wait until it quiets down.
People that moved to the
guys.
borough.
So,
Folks, please.
folks, our meeting isn't quite over. We still have,
No, you're okay. We did.
Denise, could you,
hello?
We're not
Our meeting
finished.
isn't over, just this portion of the meeting, so if we can take the conversations outside. Thank you very much.
I want to ask Lily too.
Yeah, we can do that
have
offline.
something I wanted. What was it?
Okay, so this is council reports. Since I don't have a script, it's a free-for-all. If anything you can remember.
The next thing I know of is February 22nd. It's the next open house for the library construction project. So come and see the design concept and offer some additional input.
And bring money.
And bring money.
Lots of money.
We will have a functioning donate button by then, I believe.
Yeah, and if you guys would like a quick update, I can explain what's been going on. So the Friends are actually the collector of the funds. We've been working with them to figure out how to accept donations. One of the things we have learned is the percentage that is taken off the top when we use different types of donation buttons. We've been trying to make sure that we maximize the button we do choose so that we get the most money into the project. We're working on a policy and language that basically says if you're donating more than $500, please do not use this button. Pick up the phone. We will come pick up a check from you at any time, any place in order to make that work. So that's been the delay, is we're trying to make sure that we do this correctly, but we did do an initial review. We had a meeting with the Friends today. It went very well. They are interested. They're talking to their executive board tonight.
Great. Thank you.
So a couple of park issues and North Clackamas Urban Watershed Council issue. This Saturday, there's a work party to plant native plants in the Three Creeks, which is not in Milwaukie, but it's in our UGMA. It's next to the Aquatic Center. It's an amazing place with these amazing forest of oaks. If you've never been there, you should go 9 to 12 on Saturday.
Kendra and I will be there.
Well, I won't be there this time, but I'm kind of sorry. And on the 24th, there's a work party in Spring Park, also 9 to 12. That's in the Island Station neighborhood, 19th and Sparrow. And at that one of the things they're going to do is sink Christmas trees as fish habitat. So that'll be kind of, in addition to planting some native plants and in addition to doing some trail maintenance work. And the thing from Nikki Wick from the North Clackamas Urban Watersheds Council, I just wanted to let people know, I've been meaning to send council notes since the last meeting. I haven't got it done, but April 28th, they are going to do their first ever dinner and silent auction fundraiser. They have never done that before, and they are doing that. And so I hope council members might be willing to go. That I think the dinner ticket's going to be somewhere between $50 and $60, so it's not one of those $150 ones.
Council President Beatty, what group was that? Sorry.
North Clackamas Urban Watersheds Council. There'll be more data coming out about that, but I just wanted to get the data out there. And if there's anybody who wants to donate things for their auction, whether it's a retailer who wants to donate some wine, or it's someone who has a nice house at the beach they want to donate a week stay at, I might buy that. So go ahead and donate it. So anyway, that's coming up, and yeah, I think that's it.
I don't have anything. I just would.
Day of Climate Action down in Salem next Monday from 9 to probably 4. Come join the rally.
Actually, the guy who was here in the audience from the other solar company, he's going down, Jim. He's going down. He was trying to talk me into going, and I said I wasn't going to be in town. But
I'm going.
There's a ribbon cutting for a new business.
Oh, yeah.
This week. I
yes.
Thursday. Have that information handy. You got it on your calendar?
I do.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's Thursday at 2?
Nerds to Go. 11049 Southeast Main Street from 2 to 4 is what I have.
Yeah, and they have a nice write-up in the Clackamas Review if people want to learn a little more before coming.
Chapel Theater.
And well, before you move from Nerds to Go, I just want to say that I've been there for a consultation. They're very nice, and they're capable on both platforms on PCs as well as Macs, and they have an amazing office. Like Mark read that address, and you might think, where is that? It's actually up above Revolve Vintage and Designing Women, and it's got a view out over McLaughlin and Milwaukie Bay Park. It's a really nice office.
Cool. It's above Designing Women?
It's above Designing Women. Yeah, it enters on that side next to Designing Women.
So the Chapel Theater open house will be on February 18th from 4 till 8 is what I have in my calendar. Unfortunately, I don't have an address for that, but it's up on Harrison.
41st, basically.
Yeah, 41st and Harrison.
Yeah.
It's the old church. There's a church up there.
Yeah, next to the little daycare, Green Pea.
And they're working hard.
Yeah, I've seen a lot
So
of
if anybody
stuff
hasn't
out
driven
front.
by lately, they are under construction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I follow their Facebook.
A nice addition to Milwaukee.
That's all I have. Anybody else?
Nope.
All right, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I would love to make a motion.
I'll second that.
I would have thought Asia would.
Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? We are